notice how different it feels to you. And now tell me who's got the right perspective of this space.
Mm.
And I was like, I can't. And they were like, exactly. They're all valid from wherever you're standing,
Right.
from wherever you're taking in information. You are perceiving something about the bigger picture that's valid, but
Mm.
you're not seeing the whole picture. No one is.
Hi, welcome to Finding Fuscata. I'm Sean. Today's episode is my conversation with Therese Tucker, who is a psychic medium, an artist, a jewelry maker, an entrepreneur, and just a whole host of other things. She's absolutely remarkable. And I think that you'll thoroughly enjoy this conversation. I know I certainly did. If there's a subject that's related to anything having remotely to do with Finding Fuscata and what we do, Therese and I probably talked about it a little bit at least. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you stick around towards the end. And please do consider sharing, and subscribing. I would love to be able to grow the channel and bring you more awesome guests like this. So without further ado, Therese Tucker. How long have you been doing this?
Which part? So if you're
So I
talking
was
about,
reading your bio, and it said you started out as a professional actress.
yes.
And wait, and there was one other thing. I forgot what it was. Would you tell me?
I have to remember. I've done a lot of stuff. So I was trained for acting. I went to a professional arts college,
Okay.
and majored in performance. And my dream was to do Shakespeare on stage. And I have done
Oh,
that, but I wanted to do it at a
really?
big scale. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
loved that. Ended up moving to New York to pursue my acting career. That's where I met my husband. Um, when we had our first child, I tried to continue to do acting, and I just couldn't be away from her. I didn't want to like have
Mm,
rehearsals. And so I also am an artist, and that's sort of when just being at home with my daughter and the art kind of came back in, and also the intuitive stuff was something I've done all my life, and that was sort of in the
mm,
background. I never thought that that was going to be a major part of my life or even turn into a career. It was just something that I was deeply interested in and had a lot of information and knowledge on. I started studying A Course in Miracles when I was 15 because I was
mm.
fascinated by it.
When you were
Um,
15, really?
15, yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Wow.
remember my mom was listening to Marianne Williamson give lectures on it, and I came home from school and I just felt like I was listening to something that sounded very resonant for me, felt very
Mm,
true. And so I was just listening, and I love metaphysics. So I was really
mm,
into that at a young age. And in the background, I would do things with people, like I would sort of do like group hypnosis with my friends, not trying to do anything, just taking them on like visualization, meeting their higher self, talking to their spirit guides, all this stuff that
yeah.
I'm doing just because I'm really into it. And then people started paying me to do that. And I felt very weird about it. I felt weird because I didn't know if I had permission to do it. In my head, I had to have permission from somebody.
From whom?
I don't know, like maybe a parent figure or an authority in my life. It was undefined. All I knew is that I was holding on to this belief for a long time that unless somebody told me I could do this, for some reason I wasn't allowed. So I kind of did it under the radar. I was,
Are you
yeah,
sorry?
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but that sounds like a Gen X mentality.
Yeah, I am definitely, I'm right there. They call us Zennials. I don't really,
Are you like on the cusp there?
I'm 78, yeah. So I'm kind of on that cusp. My
Wait, you're
husband's full
78
on.
years old? I'm just kidding.
Yes.
You look amazing.
Thank you.
Is it
Yeah.
like a filter or is it oil of Olay?
It's for being immortal, right? No, I'm just kidding. So my husband, he's Gen X though.
Okay.
And I very much grew up in that I was a latchkey kid. You know, we were like,
Mm,
oh, how were we roaming the streets alone in second grade? I couldn't
yeah.
even imagine letting my kids do that today,
Yeah.
but that I was feral. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
My wife is she was born in 78
okay.
and I was 72.
That's my
And
husband. Yeah.
okay. But yeah, it does seem like she came from a different planet than I did.
It is.
Like what? It's
I
just
don't
so,
know.
like her taste in music. We've got, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but like I remember the 70s, like it was like visceral. Like
Yeah.
I remember going to kindergarten with my, polyester double knit plaid slacks and a butterfly collar and being so proud of myself because I look slick, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember having like reversible pants and those were like super high tech. It was amazing. Yeah.
My husband, I remember seeing a picture of him as like maybe 5 or something. He's got the Battlestar Galactica t-shirt and
Oh,
his hair
yes.
flipped out with the wings. He had the
Yes.
spider wing.
The winged hair.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. I had
Yeah.
my mom, I'd go stay with my mom in the summertime and she just refused to cut my hair for like months. And I would just grow these awesome kind of mullet, And then of course I'd go home and my dad would be like, that's not gonna happen, man. We're not hippies in this house.
So you were like half hippie just
Yeah,
for the summer.
I think actually, I think you'll really appreciate this because okay, my father is born on November 22nd. I am born December 22nd. And my mother is born January 19th. So
Interesting.
I'm like on the cusp between two cuspers. And which is weird. It's weird going up that way because and also fun fact, I'm also ambidextrous.
Me too.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
Very
But it's
helpful.
kind of it's kind of weird because I get more I feel like I get more access to my brain than a lot of other people do, you know?
Yeah.
And but I also grew up in a weird way because my father is still just super fundamentalist Christian, Donald Trump Republican. Like he's 100% that guy. He's aged and he's mellowed and but he's the stereotype. That's him. Okay.
Yeah.
And I love him 100%. He's great. My mother is uh raw food vegan and lives on the coast of Maine and showers underneath the birch trees in the summer. It's like she's that lady. you know
Yeah.
she was a massage therapist and meditates and so that stereotype on that side, right? So I ended up it's kind of weird though because I grew up with my birthday being the 22nd. So I'm on that middle day at the end of the year, right? Like right when everything's starting to grow up. And my mother being like this super left and my father being this super right. And then never getting along. And then always and plus I'm also a middle child too. So everything
Okay.
everything about my life, I used to brag about this that my life I kind of end up being the best of the average,
Okay.
which isn't a bad place to be.
Yeah,
It
it's
just
the balance
depends
of
on
the extremes. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And then but I'm very, very staunchly middle of the road on everything.
Okay.
In fact, I grew up in a Christian home and I walked away from that years ago, but I walked away from the church, but I didn't walk away from Jesus' teachings.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yes, it
Because
does.
I, th-
Yes, it
I
does.
have found the quickest way to get somebody to leave the church is to get them to read the Bible. And then you're like,
Interesting.
oh, Jesus said to not do any of this stuff.
Thank you because okay, I didn't grow
Yeah.
up. I grew up with a Catholic family, but for
Mm,
whatever reason, I had like a sort of sphere of protection around me, around something interceding my relationship with source or God or whatever you want to call
mm,
it. But I didn't have the middleman in my
mm.
relationship. And it was interesting because it's not that they didn't try, it just didn't take. And
How do you mean the middleman in your relationship?
so I see religion like a middleman. It's not that I don't see the value in religion. I think that it's based on truths, right? There's truths in it, but it's been
Hmm.
infiltrated and it's
Right.
definitely been allowed. There's another agenda that's silently in there. And
Mm.
its intention was to put a wedge between you and God, right? You need this
Mm.
third party to access God,
Yeah.
which absolutely is not true.
Hmm.
And when I was very young, like one of my earliest memories, I'm 4 years old, we're at church, and I hear the priest talking. I'm not really paying attention to what he says. I'm looking at all the really sad and depressing pictures on the wall around me. It's like carrying the
Yeah.
cross, getting
Yeah, some
nailed to
dude
the
getting
cross.
murdered on the
Right?
wall.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like the whole thing is like
ugh.
there's death and murder around you, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
so as a 4 year old, I'm just like, this is really dark. But
Yeah.
I kind of hear the priest, he's talking, and he's basically the sum of it was God's really upset with you. He loves you, but he's really upset with you. You really disappointed him, and you got to do
Hmm.
all this work to fix it. And I just remember going, no, he doesn't. God loves us all. Like, just that was my knee jerk response. And I said it out loud. And I remember,
You said it out loud?
yeah. And
Nice.
I was 4, right? I'm like, that's not true. God loves us all, just kind of like matter of fact, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who was with me, but I do remember I got sent out to the playground with my aunts who were 10 years older than me. And I got to spend the rest of Mass out on the playground playing on the swings in the sun. I'm like, this is where God is, like we're
Awesome.
hanging out right
Yeah,
now.
right.
Um, but it was interesting is that I never was forced to acclimate. And
Mm.
because of that, I got to keep this really clear relationship with God. Now there was religion
Mm.
around me and there were people telling me about religion, but I was sort of for some reason, and these people were very devout Catholics, and my parents were forced to participate. For some reason with me, I was just agree to disagree. And nobody really pushed it. I don't know. Like I said, I feel like I have a protective bubble around me around that because the relationship with God in my life is paramount and very important.
Mm.
And I just have a very different experience with God.
Hmm.
But I also see the value, like for example, I haven't read the Bible, but I've heard a lot from the
Hmm.
Bible, and a lot resonates. And a lot of the questions I have for people who are strongly religious and make very, let's say, extreme statements is that doesn't seem like that's what Jesus was telling you to do. I don't feel
Hmm.
like Jesus was like, love everybody except these people and these people.
Right. Yeah.
But only if they followed this group, and then you love everybody.
Hmm.
Doesn't really resonate for me. So,
Yeah, there's a joke, and this is a Bible theologian joke, so it's not funny at all. But
okay.
basically, the story goes that there's these two guys that they meet on a bridge, and they're like, "Oh, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian, great." And then, "Oh, you're a Protestant, I'm a Protestant, great." And then it kind of goes and goes and goes. And then one guy's like, "Oh, you believe in you're a Calvinist," and the other guy's like, "No, I don't believe in Calvin." He's like, "Well, then you're gonna go to hell." You know, like everything else was just completely in tune except for like that one minor, like, "Oh, you believe in free will and you believe in predestination, well then we can't be friends at all."
Yes. And isn't it interesting? We're sort of in a time where that's being tested in all of us. Like, how can
Yeah.
you coexist with people who you might not fundamentally agree with everything on, but
Hmm.
you not see their value, despite the fact that you don't agree with their perspective? Do you see their value?
See,
And
this is one thing I actually struggle with. I genuinely struggle with
okay,
because when I okay, at the risk of sounding like I'm like, well, I don't see the value in people. That's not what I mean. Like,
okay,
I see the value in people, right? And one of the things that I appreciate, okay, back up a little bit. I joined the Air Force in 1994, and I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire, believing that I was not racist because we had one black kid at my school who was adopted by a white family, and I was pretty good friends with Bobby. He was a good dude. So I just thought, I guess that means I'm not racist, right?
okay.
And then I joined the Air Force and saw the rest of the world. And very suddenly I realized, oh, I'm seriously racist. I can't stand these people. And it wasn't just like black folks, it was like anybody who was not white. I'm like, I don't know where you people come from or what's going on, but your food, your culture, your language, like everything about all of you people just really irritates me to no end.
Mm.
And it took me a while, like years to, like after got into like a leadership position, and like one of my guys that worked for me was Mexican, and then I had like another black dude, and then I got forced to be roommates with a guy who was Muslim, and then I had another friend who was closeted gay, and like, and then over the years, like little by slowly, like all of these like prejudices and like and angers and all that kind of stuff started to just kind of peeling away, and I'm like, oh, humans are just like amazing, like all the way through, and even to this day, if anybody asks me, it doesn't come up often, but I hate to use the word identify, but I consider myself a recovering racist
Okay.
because it's still in there. Like it's always kind of there, because it was ingrained from a very young age.
Sure.
But anyway, I say all that because that's part of the beauty of kind of walking away from Christianity and kind of having been on this path that I've been on and being exposed to so many people that a lot of people just never ever see. But I want to go back to one other thing that I said. I forgot how I got on that tangent, but maybe it'll remind me in a second. But I want to step back for one other thing about, because I said a moment ago that, and I think you'll appreciate this. When I walked away from Christianity, but I hung on to Jesus' teachings, one of the things that I clung to, and oddly, it's based on a psychedelic experience I had, is the Jesus teaching of the straight and narrow path. And that to me has made all the difference in my life. That has been a huge, just that one phrase, just because what is it Jesus says, like the path is narrow and few who find it, but the path to destruction is wide and the gate is wide and there are many who go there. But the path to, I think it's salvation, but in the original language, it's not salvation like the Christians talk about it. It's like the path to enlightenment, the path to, I guess the Gnostics would say gnosis, which is something I'd like to get your perspective on that too. But that idea of having that straight and narrow path. Oh, that's what we were talking about, of like kind of being in the middle. Like I'm in the middle between all these dichotomies. And then it's interesting that that's the teaching from the Bible that really, really resonated with me. And then then getting back to the Course in Miracles too, once I kind of had that teaching was when the Course in Miracles really started to open up to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, this is a whole other world out here. It was amazing. So tell me more about your experience with the Course in Miracles.
Yeah, so that I would say was the fundamental understanding of metaphysics was and really specifically, I want to point out, it was the lectures that Marianne Williamson was teaching on it, because
Mm,
initially my exposure to A Course in Miracles was her lectures around it. And that's how I was able to absorb a lot of the concepts, because it is a
mm,
very dense book to read. It's
yeah.
written very much like the Bible, and um it's so dense for people that a lot of people get in there, and the first lessons are about nothing's real, you're not really here, the wall isn't really here, like it's all an
Mm,
illusion, which I agree with, but it's also very like heavy to process that. So
yeah.
her work with those early lectures she did, and I want to say those were done in like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
But that really helped me process it at that age. I needed it to be something I could understand and process. But it is work that the basis of it I returned back to. But later in life, it was really other books that like started coming in that made sense. Like, for example, Ask and It Is Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks was another book
Mm,
where I was like, oh, yeah, this is starting to make sense. Like these
mm.
things make sense to me. But the material that really,
Oh, I can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So
The last thing I heard Esther Hicks but then you said the material that really resonated with me, and then you went like,
okay,
I guess nothing resonates with this lady.
The material that really resonates with me is the law of one. I don't know if you've heard of that material.
Yeah, that's growing on me. I was skeptical of that because there's a couple things in the law of one where I'm like, I don't really know about that. But do you know Aaron Abke? Are you familiar with him?
Yes, I've actually worked
Yeah.
with Aaron before.
Really?
Yes,
Oh man.
he's
His
fantastic.
his story is very similar to mine, except I've never been a fitness model in my life.
Right.
Um,
Or worked for Google too.
yeah, never worked at Google, never anything kind of cool like that. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was on the career path to go be a pastor. And I was like,
Okay.
that was what I was doing with my life. And but for many reasons I didn't. But yeah, the law of one, I've found that to be really profound. The things that where I find skeptical are it talks somewhere about like the pyramids, things like that. And I get skeptical on that stuff because there's another guy, Matteo Di Stefano. Are you
Is
familiar
he
with
on
him?
Gaia? He has a show
He's
on
been
Gaia.
on Gaia. He's the guy that
Okay.
says that he remembers all of his past lives, like
Right.
going all the way back to when he lived in Atlantis. And then he talks about like he went on a trip with Mark Allegro, is that the guy's name? Where they went to Egypt and but he was talking about like the language and what the pyramid was for and like all these other sorts of things, which is fascinating. And I have no reason to doubt him. I mean, I remember some of my past lives.
Yeah.
Nothing as elaborate as his, but I remember like in great detail. But the things that he says don't align with the things that Ross says in the law of one. And so that's where I'm kind of like, but I don't know if that is, yeah, I just don't know what that is, you know,
Yeah. I mean, it's,
because it can be subjective, or, and I know that when you're channeling, there can be some like interpolation that comes through, like you get these images and you're trying to convert them into words,
yeah,
and it's not always quite right. You know what I mean? It's hard to take those
sure.
bigger concepts that are coming from a consciousness collective like Ra and put them into English, you know.
Yeah. Well,
But
what I find interesting with the law of one and why it resonates with me, it also happened to be produced. So they started their sessions, I believe, in 1982. And I
mhm,
can't remember when A Course in Miracles was written, but it's close to that.
that
So
same time frame, yeah,
same time frame, which is really interesting because those two materials correlate very well. They agree
yeah,
with each other on a lot of concepts. And I don't know that they would have had time to like sit down and absorb all of the Course in Miracles and then channel this material.
yeah. And
Um,
I want to say Abraham, I want to say Esther started having her experiences at about the same time. There's a lot of those channels that are very, very
a lot of
widespread
activity,
that came in the early 80s and like
late
in late
70s. Yeah.
70s, early 80s, there was like a big movement of that kind of stuff that was happening.
And yoga was like coming over to like the
Hmm.
United States, right? So there was this movement. If you're familiar with Dolores Cannon's material, she is also
Hmm. I love her.
um she's a spiritual mentor of mine. That's how I met
Hmm.
her was after she
You met
passed.
her?
After she passed, because as a
Okay.
medium.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of funny the story because she was trying to get my attention and I wouldn't give her the time of day.
Really?
Yeah. So here's
You're
how it
like,
would
you're dead, Dolores. I've got
I
your
just
books.
well, and I had to apologize later because I didn't
Oh.
realize like she was trying to get me to pay attention. So what would happen is I'd have my website and I wanted to put my videos from YouTube onto embed it into my website. And I
Hmm.
would how you embed it, but you need to go check the live feed and see if it took up the video.
Hmm.
So every time I would load one of my videos and then go check my live site, it would be a video of her to the point where I was like, what in the F is this old lady doing on my website? Get off. And anyway, in meditation, I had to sit with it. I'm like, what is it? And she was like, you need to listen to what I'm sending you. And then I'd listen to it and I was like, and
Oh.
of course, get back to meditation, be like, sorry, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
right.
listening now.
Sorry, Miss Cannon.
I love her. I love Dolores Cannon's work. And again, correlates with the other material very well. So the reason I bring her up is because you said, we had this boom in the 70s and early 80s with all this activity. That would be right about when the second wave of volunteers came in, which is us.
Mm,
We're
yeah,
in the second wave.
yeah.
We're the
I
generators. So
yeah. I have okay. I'm about to tell you something I've never told anybody before.
oh my
And are you ready? Are you ready for this? I have I have a tattoo.
gosh. No. Oh my gosh.
No, I've always had this feeling since, and I don't know if it's because I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home where, we were taught about the rapture and people being left behind and like all this other kind of stuff, or if it's just kind of like something that's in my genetic makeup or just my disposition, which is more likely. But I've always had this sort of knowing that if there ever was to be a rapture or an event like that, I would be one of the people who was left behind to
Hmm.
help with conversions and cleanup and continuing to spread continuing to reach out to people.
Yes.
And it was never like I was never upset about it. I remember having dreams and being like, yeah, this is fine. I remember like um just being really really stressed out about being left behind, or people talking about being stressed out about being left behind after the rapture, and me thinking that'd actually be kind of cool because there'd be like so much work to do and it would be a fascinating thing to see, you know what I mean, like wow, those people were just like gone. But as I've kind of matured in my faith, and once I actually started reading the Bible, I've come to the conclusion that if and when there were ever to be a rapture, I think a lot of Christians the next day would be wondering why all these like homosexuals, transgenders, and Satanists and atheists, like, why are they all gone all of a sudden? you know, because
Interesting.
yeah, because like Jesus doesn't say anything in the Bible about like you have to, go to the church in the corner and say the sinner's prayer and be baptized into this. What does he say? He says, in that last day, there are people who will come to me and say, Lord, Lord, we cast out demons in your name. And he'll say, well, get away from me. I never knew you because I was sick and you didn't visit me. I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was in jail and you didn't, you know what I mean? Like those are all the things and you didn't do it. And then there'd be other people who were welcomed into the kingdom. And they'll be like, yo, what gives? Like, we don't even know who you are. And Jesus said, yeah, but when I was sick, you helped me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. You
Hmm.
know, so I mean, if you're going to take the teaching of Jesus literally, then it's like there's a whole lot of Christians that are going to be there the next day. Like,
Well, this is okay. So let me, since I don't have that as my background, like the teaching of the rapture or even hold an idea of that, my approach to it is more of the two or three world split, which I think is really interesting. And that actually is documented in Dolores's research and
mhm,
talked about in the Law of One again.
yeah,
And with the Law of One, what they're talking about here is polarizing, and it's not necessarily through a faith, but rather through choosing a path towards power. So the way I understand it is that power's on this spectrum, and you could kind of see like here's the negative side, if you will, here's the positive side. The middle is neutral.
mhm,
And their whole thing is you have to polarize to one of these directions. So the positive would be service to others, the negative would be service to self. But
mhm,
it's where personal power kicks in, meaning like the ability to co-create in your life. You really need to like polarize in a certain direction. Either I'm doing this to help other people or,
mhm,
you know, lift others up, or I'm doing this to serve myself. But in the middle is sort of this neutral place where we haven't really decided. And so that's why
mhm,
like things like manifesting for most people, don't resonate, because to manifest is to imply a powerful energy that you are utilizing to summon
Mm.
something into your life. And I don't mean like I'm summoning gold bars into my life. I wish, but that's not really what it means. It just means I'm
Yeah.
using personal energy, which means you have to polarize to the power centers. And what's interesting in the material is that God doesn't really care which direction you go, because you're going to end up at home eventually. Just one path is the express path home, and the other is sort of a terrible scenic route. But you eventually wake up and go, separation isn't true. I'm connected to
Mm.
something, and you ricochet over to the positive side. So it just
Mm.
takes a lot longer to get to that wisdom. Um, but this three world split, I want to share it with you and see what your take is. So again, I don't know how this looks, but the way that people have talked about it is that these two poles would split, and there'd be the higher fourth density experience, which is the we're currently in fourth density consciousness now. We're in the lower fourth, but we would move into the loving higher fourth,
Mm.
which is the teachings of the heart and all the lessons there. The
Mm.
negative pole would go to negative fourth density, which would be how to kind of the experiences living without the heart on. And then the
Mm.
middle would be people who didn't neutralize and therefore are choosing to repeat third density, and they would be put on like another earth that would be very similar to this one, where they would get the chance to again polarize and make a choice. You just
Mm.
move your energy a little in one or the other direction, and then you would then have the chance to graduate from there. So that's how
Mm.
I understand it. As far as what happens to the earth, what I understand is the like the negative shifting or the terraforming of the earth might happen, um maybe on the negative polarity or without us at all. So
Mm.
we wouldn't even be on this plane. We would be on another plane, as I understand it.
Oh man, you're getting all kinds of new information out of me today.
But wait, you didn't tell me about the tattoo. What's the tattoo? You told me you had one, but now you gotta tell me what it is.
Actually, you know what's funny? I have three tattoos,
Okay.
and that I got. I kind of like my dad and I got in a fight one time, and he told me that if I ever got a tattoo or got my ear pierced, he'd kick me out of the house. And then one day we got in a fight, and he kicked me out of the house, and I'm like, well, I might as well go get my ear pierced and some tattoos, right?
Right.
So, but I got a rabbit on my thigh because I was a cyclist, and it just looked like the rabbit was running. It's very silly. I got a rose on my ankle, which there was a girl involved and it was a bad decision. And
Okay.
I keep it as a reminder that sometimes 17-year-olds make bad decisions with their life and
Right.
do not judge too hard.
Right.
And then on my upper back, I've got like a Celtic cross. And I never really thought about it. And it was my ex-wife did that. So, and I think she was mad at me that day. So it's like really, really dark. She was like, mother son of a
There's a lot of emotions that go
tattoo.
into your tattoos, don't
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. The well, the rabbit was like, it was like this distinct feeling of freedom. I found that when I'm on a bike, that's when I have a lot of anger to process, I get on a bicycle and I'll go ride 30 miles. You know, when I went through my divorce, I did a century, it was a 100-mile bike ride,
Whoa.
and I trained for it for months, where like every weekend I would go and ride 65 miles, 75 miles, 85 miles. And then I would do like 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles up until the century ride. And then I did another 100 miles. And that like that last 100-mile ride, I'm like, okay, I think I got it worked out now. Like, it was like Forrest Gump running across the
I
country.
was just gonna say,
I just kept on running.
yep,
I'm
all
on
the
my
way to
bicycle.
Florida.
Yeah. But what was interesting is what kind of tied all those things together is later on, especially as I started to leave Christianity, I got very involved in Rosicrucianism,
Okay.
and um, And all of those, like obviously the rose and the cross are, deeply tied into Rosicrucianism, but then also the rabbit as a sign of like fertility and strength. And rabbits have a lot of symbolism. But I always thought
Yeah.
that was really interesting that Rosicrucianism came along, and as I started reading about it, I'm like, oh, apparently this has been on my life path all along because I've already got the tattoos.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
there. You got the whole thing.
yeah. No, but the thing that I was going to tell you that I had never told anybody before was the part about me secretly wanting to be there the day after the rapture. But now that we're talking about, now that we're on this subject, oh man, this is way off the deep end. Do you want to go?
Yes, I
You
love going
ready?
up the deep end. I
So,
can do it.
way
Easy.
off the deep end. Okay.
Wait, let's go there.
So, are you familiar with Tom Campbell?
No.
You should become familiar with Tom Campbell. He's a physicist,
Okay.
and he has a book called My Big Toe. And he worked with Bob Monroe.
I'm
Are
gonna
you
write
familiar
this
with
down.
the Monroe Institute?
You know, I've watched Cosmic Disclosure, so if we're going anywhere in that direction, then I've probably heard about it. But as far as
Yeah.
like locking it in, no.
Okay. Yeah, you'll want to learn more about the Monroe Institute. They're the
Okay.
ones who developed the hemisync for meditation and stuff like that.
No, wow. No,
You don't
you're
know
telling
what
me a whole
hemisync?
bunch of
Oh
I didn't
man, this is gonna be great. This is so
teach
cool.
me, teach me.
Okay. So Bob Monroe was a businessman, and he started having spontaneous out of body experiences.
Yep.
And he happened to be quite wealthy. And he was also very intelligent. He was a scientist. I forget what genre, but he was very intelligent, had some money, was having these experiences, wrote a book called, I think it's like Experiences Out of the Body, kind of on the nose, and was soliciting to try and find some scientists to come and help him study this, right? At the time, a fellow named Tom Campbell was a physicist. He had just finished his graduate degree, and he's like a theoretical nuclear physicist. He worked for NASA for a long time, and his job was to do the math to figure out the things that could possibly go wrong on a space shuttle and cause it to blow up. Like
Okay.
he was the guy that doing, but on like the thing with the beads and what do they call that?
Oh, the abacus.
Like yeah, like on an abacus and pencils. No, there's this was in the 60s.
Wow.
He's like
Okay.
with a slide rule, and he's trying to anyway.
Right.
Just like brilliant guy. Anyway, during his graduate studies, he found that if he got himself into a meditative state, he didn't even know what this meant. He knew nothing about meditation.
Mhm.
But if he got himself into a meditative state, he would find answers immediately
Yes.
to problem. Like just that part of his brain would just turn on. And if he had like all this code that he'd written on like the old punch cards and stuff like that, instead of having to go through line by line, like the card that had the wrong punch code on it would just kind of like stand out. And he'd be like, okay, that's the one. He could fix it immediately.
Hmm.
And so the answers just came to him very quickly. And his boss presented him with this book, the Bob Monroe's book, and he found out that Bob Monroe was looking for some help. So he went and another friend of his, and the three of them built the Monroe Institute, and where they studied out of body experiences. And what they did is, because Bob and I forget the other guy's name, they were physicists. Like these are very, very hard science, analytical math
Right.
heads,
Very left-brained. Yeah.
very, very left brain, who were having out of body experiences that they couldn't explain. So they took that scientific math training and applied it to studying higher consciousness, and they mapped out the whole entire thing. And so Tom Campbell's book is called My Big Toe. It's his theory of everything, and where he goes through the math and explains how this version of reality is a projection. This is a holographic universe. You know that concept, right?
Hmm.
And but then talks about how you can use the hemisync to have out of body experiences, and like how everything in the greater consciousness system works, right?
Yeah.
So take all that Tom Campbell stuff and like we'll put it over here in this bucket for a minute. There's another fella named fella, like he's a bro of mine, but his name's Donald Hoffman,
Donald
and
Hoffman.
yeah, and he studied. He's a scientist, and I want to say he's at Stanford. I believe it's at Stanford. And I think don't quote me on the school, but he's another one of these like 50-pound brain guys.
Right.
And he was studying vision and how the brain perceives things through the eyes, and he was working with physicists and mathematicians to take all their information and trying to determine how the brain sees things. And his conclusion is that the brain doesn't there's an absolute 0% chance that we perceive reality as it truly is
Right.
based on our
Yep.
evolution, right? So I figured you appreciate that, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah, so based on our evolutionary processes, the only things that we can see and sense are things that satisfy the five F's, right? Fight, flee, fornicate,
On freeze.
forage. Right. Are you froze for a second? You there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, you're still freezing. Oh, now you're back. Okay, cool.
Mac.
Okay. Because if there was no evolutionary benefit to us perceiving those things, then those. Oh, that was my internet. Is my. Hang on a second.
Hold on. I'll make sure nobody's on my Wi-Fi right now because sometimes my kids jump on.
Okay, so Donald Hoffman. So his conclusion is that anything that doesn't give us an evolutionary advantage just is not seen by our senses, right?
Mm.
Now, he doesn't go so far as to say that therefore there are angels and therefore there are, he doesn't go all the way down there. He's an analytical scientist and he's like very by the book kind of guy, and 100%. But if you take those two ideas, the Tom Campbell's idea and the math behind it and what Don Hoffman has done, and you kind of put them over in this bucket for a second, right? Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this.
I got it. I'm following you. Yeah, go.
There's another interesting phenomenon that I think got overlooked, which happened on December 21st, 2012. And you remember like the whole thing with the end of the Mayan calendar and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah.
Mhm.
One of the things that happened, as I understand it, and I've researched this a bit,
Okay.
but one of the things that happened on that date was we, as a solar system, we crossed a galactic plane.
Yes. Okay. I want you to keep going, but I just want to interject with that. What I got when I asked my team about it was the Earth transitioned. She went up another octave. So we didn't
Mm-hmm.
go up necessarily with her, but
Right.
she progressed upward. But okay.
Correct. So my hypothesis is that because our path, if you look at our path around, like, if you take like the Milky Way galaxy like this and then
Mhm.
flip it on its side, right? You'd imagine that we just go like straight around it, but we don't. We kind of oscillate up and down. And in fact, the whole Milky Way galaxy kind of oscillates up and down as it's
Okay.
turning around, It's like, if you like took a pancake and like flipped it, or somebody spinning the pizza, it's never like perfect.
It's a
It's kind of like,
wobble. It's a
yeah, it's kind of like
wobble.
wobbles all over the place as it's spinning, right?
Hmm.
And then so our planet, our whole solar system kind of does one of these wobbly things, right?
Hmm.
My hypothesis is that, especially since modern science has only been around for a few hundred years, and the ways that we have to detect some of these subtle energies, gravity waves, things like that, have only happened within the last decade. I suspect that when we cross that galactic plane, we are now being exposed to vibrations and frequencies from the center of the galaxy, which we were previously shielded from. Because there
Yes.
were, dust clouds and stars and planets and all that kind of stuff like in the way. But
Yeah.
then once we come up to that part, then we're exposed to something else. And then the earth, because it's now in this different resonance field, she's going to resonate differently, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and I think that's the thing that we're all feeling, is that she's kind of shaken differently right now. And then, and this is something else where Jesus said in Matthew that, during the last days, there'll be like wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes, but to not worry, because these are the beginnings of the birth pains,
Hmm.
which always stuck with me. I'm like, birth pains? We're being like, what is this?
Hmm.
Because it's labor pains, and you have to go through the labor in order to come through onto something amazing on the other side.
That's right. That's
So,
so interesting you say that because and to go even deeper, because we haven't really gone off the edge yet, but I
oh,
channel
there's more.
I channel the Arcturian Council. They say the same
Really?
thing. Yes,
Really?
they say the same thing. They said you're in the birth canal, so we are
Oh,
very
yeah.
close.
Yeah.
But it's painful in there. I mean, if we don't remember what it was like, thank God, because
Mm-mm.
what a that would be a very claustrophobic experience for a lot of us.
Yeah, that's gonna be a weird day.
Remembering that would be a weird day.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yes. So keep going. But yes, I agree.
So, okay. So now we get this galactic idea, and we'll put it over here in this bucket for a second, right?
Okay.
And if it's true,
Hmm.
the things that Ra talks about, the things that Abraham talks about and that Nikola Tesla talks about, that everything is frequency, and that we really do live in a holographic projection, and that matter isn't the thing that matters, then I think it's possible that when the earth vibrates at a certain frequency, when it gets to a certain resonance pitch, the people who are in line with that resonance pitch could physically appear to disappear,
Oh yeah.
like turning a dial, like you're just suddenly just like not there
Here's
anymore.
what's crazier
Yeah.
is the people who appear to disappear will still be aware of the ones there. The ones, so let's go with the basic model of the regular people and those who ascend,
Oh
right? The
man, I've
ones
got
who,
chills. I've wanted to talk about this stuff for so long.
it's my favorite topic anytime.
Yes. All right.
So
Cool.
the people, and I'm simplifying this way down, and I
Mm-hmm.
really want to make it clear to the audience, I don't believe in good or bad people. I'm just saying those who, let's say, like you said, resonate with the frequency that takes them up.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's those who are resonating at, let's say, the base frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I understand it, those who resonate up will still be very aware of those at the, so it's
Yeah.
like our spirit guides. They see us perfectly fine. Those in higher
Mm-hmm.
dimensions can experience us. We're like, you're invisible. I can't see you. I feel like you're communicating, but I can't quite hear you. It would be
Right.
just like that for the people who were sort of at that base level of staying there.
Mm-hmm.
We would appear to have vanished, but the truth is we don't.
Right.
We don't. We're not, we haven't disappeared, and
Yeah.
we're very aware of them. They're less aware of us.
Yeah.
So wild.
What I Part of my hypothesis is that people who are attached to matter
Hmm.
mentally, emotionally, and physically, i.e., microchips in their brains attached. I don't mean people who have like a prosthetic arm, you know,
Right.
but
You're
people
talking
who,
transhumanism,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, transhumanism. I don't think those people will be able to shift.
That's exactly what I
That's
was
and that
going.
that's my concern, and that's why, especially with that's like such a huge movement, So when I hear Dolores Cannon talking about like this shift, and I hear people talking about like fourth density and third density and like all these sorts of things that are coming, the thing that resonates with me, I'm like, and I'm obviously I have no way of knowing, and this is Sean, not a professional anythingist, like speculating, just like taking these different pieces and parts and putting them together and saying this is kind of like the thing that they're all talking about. But that's the thing that would make sense to me, is
Yeah.
that if you have committed to matter, and you are strictly a materialist and you think that matter is what matters to the point where you are willing to literally plug yourself into the matrix, not just with like Google glasses, but with like a microchip in your head,
Yep.
because that's going to change your frequency. That's going to change your
What could
resonance
they
pattern.
program in? I mean, considering that a lot of our devices are frequency based now, I mean, our
Yeah.
phones getting signals, right? This camera
Mhm.
that we're using, it's getting a signal. The Wi-Fi we're
Yeah.
using, how easy would it be for them to manipulate? If somebody out there had a nefarious agenda, how easy would it be to manipulate the consciousness of a person without them
Yeah.
even knowing they're being manipulated, as long as they've accepted? I mean, that's where the free will comes in, right? Because you always have the choice. We're at this point right now where it's not introduced to us publicly or fully or popularly yet.
Hmm.
And so we still have a choice right now. Yeah, I would do that. No, I wouldn't. And when it is offered, we have the choice again. Once you accept that, you are basically accepting by um what's the word I'm looking for? It's not direct agreement, it's implied agreement that whatever they
Mm.
do through that, you've
Implied
accepted
consent. Yeah.
implied consent. Thank you. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
the dark teams run around. That's how they get around a lot of stuff with us, is that we didn't say
Man.
yes, but we also didn't say no. And since you didn't technically say no,
Yep.
then I'm showing this to you and you didn't go, oh my God, absolutely not. I don't consent. They
Right.
can use that as the entrance in. So it's like you didn't invite me into your house, but you also didn't say I couldn't come in. So
Yeah.
that I came in through your back window.
Yeah. I this forgive me if this is touchy, but this is the next video that I'm working on this week is about language.
Mm,
Because and let me put a blanket statement down
okay.
first.
Okay.
Ready? Everybody listening, okay? There is no amount of rewards, physical or emotional or otherwise, in all of the cosmos that would ever convince me to vote for either Biden or Trump.
Okay.
This guy's not going to do that. They're just like horrifying to no end, both of them, including Kamala Harris. And I know a lot of people, like, if you say, well, I don't support Biden, they're like, oh, you must have a MAGA hat somewhere. And I'm like, I totally do not. I also do not like him. Both of these people scare the shit out of me. So,
Hmm.
but because I just don't trust anybody's agenda. I don't trust this stuff. Anyway, I say all that because Kamala Harris has been saying something lately in her stump speeches and stuff like that that really, really deeply frightens me. And it's that same sort of like implied consent thing
Mm-hmm.
where she says we're moving into the future unburdened by the past, which sounds great. It sounds like I've let go, I've released, I've forgiven, I have, like I'm just like I've released all this negative energy, I've had my chakras cleared, I'm like,
Right.
dealt with my childhood trauma, I'm unburdened by my past, and I'm moving into the future. But there's a darker side to that too, because you can also be unburdened by the past by ignoring the Constitution of the United States, by ignoring laws that have been written, by ignoring Marcus Aurelius, like ignoring, the Bhagavad Gita. Like you're still unburdened by the past.
Right.
And it's like one of those things that it's like it's a trick of the language, you know what I mean? And it,
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
and I feel like that's just it's a dangerous, and I'm not saying that's her intention. I have no idea. I don't know her from Eve. I can speculate
Yeah.
all day long, but I cannot know somebody else's heart or their path.
Well, I do have to point out, and again, I'm not going to sway anybody because I believe that each person's going to come to their conclusion on their own. So,
Yeah.
not to sway, only to point out the way in which she has suddenly found herself in power. A person who couldn't even get 1% of the vote when she was running to be president now is inserted into place without the public's consent. That to
Yes.
me is a dark move. So
Very dark
without
move.
knowing her intention, we do know the actions, and it's the actions of people I look at. It's not their personality or how much I like them or if they look the way that I need them to look. It's about the actions that they take, and
Yeah.
that's how I'm making my choices. Yeah.
I saw a there's been a lot of people who have been saying that lately, that the Democrats, Joe Biden has been talking a lot about how, Donald Trump is a fundamental threat to our democracy. And he's not wrong. I mean, January 6th, like all these people came out and they're like, oh, most of it was just people taking pictures and it was friendly, happy folks. I'm like, yeah, except for the lady that got shot in the face, who got shot and killed because she was
Was
trying
a
to get through.
Republican. Yeah, she was.
Yeah, and the people who, like, the guy was jumping down out of the balcony and had zip ties and like he was going to get Nancy Pelosi. Like these were not happy tourists that were in the building. Like we can't forget that it was both of those things at the same time. And that was a dark, dark day in American history. And shoot, what was I saying? I lost. I get so fired up. I'm like, you
I
can't
know. Okay.
ignore it.
Let me try to see if we could trace it back. Let me think. Well, what's interesting. Okay, so
Oh,
just
oh,
go
okay.
ahead. No, go
So
ahead.
sorry.
You got it.
The thing what I was saying is that I remember at the same. Okay, a lot of people have been talking about this. Is that they're saying that Trump is a fundamental threat to democracy, right? That's been the narrative
They're
on the
mine.
and I don't, and they're not wrong. I do think it poses some significant threats for a lot of different reasons. But there is also that line from Shakespeare, which you'll appreciate, of methinks the lady doth protest too much, you know, which is
Hmm.
the same thing. Like I remember one time watching Lindsey Graham like go on a rant about gay people. And I'm like,
Right.
really, dude, can you like just show up one time, in your full Elton John and be the queen of the Senate? Everybody would love you. Like just let us see you in your gayness. It'd be wonderful. Like,
Well, and
you
let's
know,
are you familiar with Foster and Kimberly Gamble and the Thrive movement, the
the
Thrive documentaries?
the Thrive. Oh, from like years ago.
Right. The first one came out in 2012, and that was the
Yeah.
one where they start by explaining the torsion field that's around all living things
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
knowing
Mm-hmm.
that connection. And then, of course, they go into, by the way, there is this corrupt system that's happening. And
Yeah.
they do explain in that there is, we're under the illusion that there's a two-party system when really there is something else completely going on that has to
Yeah.
come to light. And I believe we're in the period of time where that does come to light. People are starting to see it. They're starting to smell, for another Shakespeare quote, that something's rotten in the state of Denmark, except
Mm-hmm.
it's the United States, right?
Yeah.
Something's rotten here. And what we're finding is that this system isn't just in the United States, it's a global system. And of
Oh
course,
yeah.
then we go back to transhumanism, and that's connected to that one world global agenda. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, that they wanted to depopulate the planet and they want to run it, and that they want to control us, and that they can't control the numbers that are here now. We are actually very
Mm-hmm.
powerful. So the game is to keep us divided. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you and I agree on many things, not all things we agree on. I have a little bit of a different political take,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
fine.
you're. It's fine that you're wrong about a few things.
I'm allowed to be wrong. So are you. But, but the thing is, this conversation is the
Yeah.
exact opposite of what they would like us to have. They do not
Mm.
want people having thoughtful, respectful conversations, bringing their ideas together and listening to each other, because that's very unifying. They
Mm-hmm.
want us divided, and they are going after every sector, every way they can divide us, man against woman, right? Like gay
Mm.
against straight, black against white,
Yep.
Democrat, Republican, what as many ways as they can divide us and keep us busy squabbling amongst ourselves, trying to have this sense of superiority or righteousness over each other, while in the background they're effing up a whole bunch of stuff and making life and the quality of living terrible for all people and
Yeah.
leading us down a very dark road. And I'm really hoping that with conversations like these, where we can come together and hear each other
Hmm.
and see where we agree, because I find that people actually we're closer in agreement than not. Yes,
Yeah.
there are
We really are.
details. We
Yeah.
really are, and we need to see that. So I'm hoping that
Yeah.
conversations like these are very powerful seeds planted in consciousness, because the more we can see people actually having thoughtful conversations and not having to be, well, like for example, I do see things a little bit differently. You know, the January 6th thing you bring up. I'm not saying that what you're seeing isn't valid. I'm just saying I've seen other things and bits of evidence that I put together and I go,
Mm.
something feels off here. Something
Oh
feels
yeah.
contrived and manipulated. And I feel like some people are getting thrown under the bus that don't deserve
Yeah.
to.
Oh, 100%.
So
Yeah.
that affects my decision making as I see those details. But that what I love about conversations like these is that your point of view isn't a threat to me at all. It's actually quite helpful. And
Yeah.
that's what needs to happen. We need to have these conversations where someone
Yeah.
says, look at this, look at how this worked out. And the other person goes, I see that. Now look at these things that I see.
Yeah.
And two people break it apart. At the end of the day, you're going to believe what you believe. I'm going to believe what I believe, but we can actually have a mutual understanding and even more respect for each other while we work through our perspectives. And the way that my
Mhm.
team, I got a really beautiful message from my own spirit team years ago. And they told me, they said, Therese, this idea that everyone's going to have a unified perspective, you've got to let it go. And you've got to
Mm.
see the value that source sees in all of your different perspectives. And I said,
Yes.
explain it to me. And they said, okay, imagine you're in a big square room and you're standing in the center. I said, okay. They said, now imagine looking around that room, see the perspective of the room if you were standing in the center. Got it. They said, now I want you to populate this room full of people. And the ones who are standing right next to you, right up next to you, have a very similar perspective of what's going on in that room. And they said, but not even they share the exact perspective because they're standing slightly to the right, slightly to the
Mm.
left, slightly behind, slightly in front. So you guys basically see the same thing, but slightly differently. And they said, now be on the corners of the room or the walls of this room and see the room. Notice how different it feels to you. And now tell me who's got the right perspective of this space.
Mm.
And I was like, I can't. And they were like, exactly. They're all valid from wherever you're standing,
Right.
from wherever you're taking in information. You are perceiving something about the bigger picture that's valid, but
Mm.
you're not seeing the whole picture. No one is. And that the best thing you could do is, instead of being afraid of the people who are holding this very intense, different perspective from you, is to actually be curious and try to learn from them. What do you see? To
Mhm.
get as much of the bigger picture as possible. You'll never see the whole thing at once, but if you have an openness and a willingness to meet people where they are, not try to change them and drag them to your perspective, but actually
Mm.
meet them where they are, you're going to see a much bigger picture. You're going to understand the biggest picture possible. And that's actually, they said, kind of the point of this experience is to, it's like we're all walking around with a piece of the puzzle. And it's not to get all the pieces, it's to put them together. So what does the puzzle show you? You'll never know unless you expand your mind and expand your open yourself up to different perspective. And so many people I find are sort of afraid to do it because I think they're afraid they will lose something
Mm.
in
Yes.
doing it. And you really don't. You either appreciate more where you're coming from, or you've got a little bit more information. Yeah, you might
Yeah.
change your mind on something, but that's going to
Good.
be you changing your mind.
Right. God, there's so many things that kind of like, oh yeah, oh yeah. Mm. Wow. But to circle back to me being a recovering racist, some of the But seriously, like the some of the people that I met in my military career, whom I still value the most, that I absolutely just honor and respect and cherish these people, are the ones who called me on my racism. And then we sat down and we had like a heart to heart conversation, and I'm like, yeah, but you guys, and they were like, nah, I think you need to check yourself. And, but like had like hard conversations. And I don't know how all of them feel about me these days because the conversations were always, tense, but it was me being willing to step into those conversations, knowing that I had something inside of me that needed growth and changing, and not worrying about whether or not they did.
Yeah.
And like one of the greatest things I got from leaving the Christian church, leaving evangelicalism, is I stopped trying to convert other people.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And started just seeing people where they were and
yeah.
being willing to open myself up. And like you said, um, but this is a strange thing though, because there's two different ideas. One, are you familiar with David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins? Like the
Yes.
levels of consciousness. And
Yes.
so he's got a book called Truth versus Falsehood. And he talks about his concept of truth, which is similar to what you said about, like, being in the room and everybody has a different perspective, right? And the example that he uses is that if you imagine a birthday party and there's a little girl in the middle of the room and she opens up a present and say it's a Barbie doll, right? And in that room, there's aunts and uncles and mom and dad and cousins and siblings and grandma and grandpa and the dog, and
Mhm.
everybody else is in that room, right? Every one of them has a different perspective on what that means. Like another little girl, I'm like, well, I got a different Barbie, or that Barbie's nicer than mine, or somebody else is going to be like, well, I wish I hadn't gotten that, or maybe that, though, you spent too much money on that, or everybody has their own perspective on that. But there is still a fundamental truth, which is that a little girl opened a birthday present. Like
Yes.
a thing did happen.
Hmm.
Everybody has their own perspective on it, which is why I get frustrated with the language of like discovering your own truth, because you can't have your own truth. You can have your own perspective on the truth. You can find what resonates with you. You can, live your best life based on what resonates with you, but you don't get your own truth. There is a truth that by definition has to exist.
I've heard this argument before, and I agree with it, and it also confuses me a little bit. And I feel like the arguments I've heard from other people, like I think this is someone who I don't resonate with, but I listen to people who make me uncomfortable. But Michael
Yeah.
Knowles, as an example, I think talked about it. I know. You get
I'm
it.
I'm I love him as much as I loathe him. Like some of his stuff I'm like, "Oh, preach it." But then sometimes I'm like, "Oh, shut up."
So, yeah, and I feel that way.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people. I tend to resonate most with people in the middle. The people who are
Yeah.
in the middle, I'm like, okay, that's closest to my perspective. Um, but every once in a while I'll listen to it just to hear what's being said because he's like so anti everything I do. And I'm pretty sure if I ever met him, he would be very kind to me. It
Oh,
wouldn't be, I do not believe he would be vicious in any way, but
no.
he fundamentally, everything I believe in, he thinks is either just plain wrong or full on satanic. And I
Right.
don't claim Satan or anything like that. I actually don't even believe in it to the degree. I mean, I believe that there's dark energy and there's dark forces, but I don't empower it at all with my thoughts.
Right.
Um, but he was talking about that, or it was Matt Walsh, one of the two of them. Ultimate truth, right? This ultimate truth. And I'm thinking, okay, but even that I feel is subject to our perspective. It's not that I don't agree that there's an ultimate truth, but how would we define that and what
Right.
parameters would define it?
Right.
And then
And
we get into things like, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, you're good.
we get into things like the transgender debate, which
Hmm.
is a huge one. It's a very hot button topic right now. And
Yeah.
there are people who literally have not every, and I don't believe everybody who claims to be one is one. That's kind of one of my takes on it. But I
Yeah.
do believe that there are people who have that mental capacity where their brain is telling them this is what I am and it's
Yeah.
their reality. So how could I define the ultimate truth for this person if there's a neurological state happening that is causing them so much distress
Hmm.
that they can't handle it, that they need to transition in order to feel in alignment with what's true for them.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this ultimate truth, yes, I get that. And I agree with it. I just don't know if we'll ever get an agreement amongst humanity on
Mm-mm.
what that is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that we can, because there have been, I kind of chalk it up to what I think of as bibliolatry, which is people who worship the Bible rather than following Christ or worshiping God or
Yeah.
worshiping a higher truth. They worship the Bible.
Yes.
And um
Well, okay, so here's an
or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita. You know, like they hold these texts, or the A Course in Miracles, or a Law of One.
exactly.
Like people look at this text and they think that's the thing, and it's like, no, that's not the thing. There's a thing beyond. It's like in what Buddha said, that you're trying to get your dog to look at the moon and he's just looking at your finger.
Right. Yes, I think that we're on the same track here. I feel like exactly. So for example, I might say the ultimate truth is love. Seeing
Right.
love as the highest force. Whereas someone else might mean the same thing, but they would say the ultimate truth is Christ, right? And
Mhm.
or Jesus, meaning the same thing,
Right.
but our labels are what's kind of interrupting us from getting to the same point.
Mhm.
So the language gets in the way.
The language does get in the way, but I think that, oh man, this is going way deeper than I thought I was gonna.
I know, right? I did not think we would go here. I didn't think we'd
No,
get political either. It's been so fun. It's
this is great.
slightly dangerous feeling, but
I
so
know
fun.
we're like walking right on that edge. Like,
We're on that
ooh.
fine, fine line,
And we
right?
haven't even gotten into the real woo-woo stuff like crystals and like,
Which I'm like, I'm surrounded by all these. Yeah,
ah, man. There's okay. There's a sense in, okay, so here's my perspective on the greater truth. And it's not any text. It's okay, so here's an idea. You'll appreciate this. There's a very real sense in which Romeo and Juliet are more real than Sean and Therese.
tell me about it. Okay, why?
Okay. Because I did a podcast episode about this a couple weeks ago. All right, think about this. There's a lot of historical information about William Shakespeare,
Hmm.
right? Somebody could probably do some research and find out who William Shakespeare's dad was. Maybe William Shakespeare's cousin, but nobody anywhere ever will know who made William Shakespeare's shoes. Like that person is gone to history, right?
Right?
It was a real human being who like ate food and sweat and maybe made babies. Like there was a human, there was a blob of DNA wandering around the planet in borrowed mud and then laid it back down and doesn't exist anymore, right? No
Yeah.
memory of that person whatsoever, except in a statistic where the people of this time period wore shoes like this. And that's the only memory that this person left on the planet, right? But I always get the Capulets and the, what was the other?
Montagues.
Montagues and the Capulets, right?
Mhm.
That Romeo and Juliet, they were a representative of maybe a real story that happened. Maybe this was something in the news and maybe little bits and pieces were taken, right? But when
Mhm.
those two people got fictionalized and written down, for hundreds of years now, people have reenacted their lives. They've dug deep into what were Juliet's motives? What was
Hmm.
Romeo thinking? What was he, you know what I mean? And we know them. Like we know them in our bones, like viscerally. Like I know what it's like to be a teenage boy and impossibly in love with a beautiful girl, and I just can't get there, and I just want to take my own life because I'm so overwhelmed. Like I know what that feels like, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so 50 years from now, 100 years from now, nobody's going to know who I am. I'll be gone. 200 years from now, I won't even be a memory of a memory. I know nothing about my great grandfather. I know that he existed because I'm here. I
Right.
know that he came over from Sweden. What did he look like? I know he had two kids. I don't know what was his daily routine. How did he shave? Like, and his father probably lived in Sweden and was a dairy farmer. Like that's it. So that's three generations removed of somebody who's just gone to history,
Yeah.
right? But Romeo and Juliet are still real.
Well,
So
and they represent archetypal energy, which is something that the law
that's
of one talks about,
that's
right?
exactly it. That's exactly it. Is that it's that archetypal energy where we have like all those things that Carl Jung always talked about, where the Jungian archetypes, in these stories and the hero's journey, that we see over and over and over again. I think that's the real thing in this dimension. I think in other dimensions, other planes, it may be something else entirely that we can't conceptualize. But for us, because of the evolutionary history of humans and the earth and blah blah blah, that that archetype and those archetypal characters within that, I think those are the things that are true. And the thing that they create, I think that's the ultimate truth for this reality plane.
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
And so to me, so what is that? Right?
There are
So,
teachers. So, okay, look at this. So this is how I would look at this plane. I see it as a grad school, and there's actually quite a
mm,
wait list to get into Earth, to be on 3D Earth and go through the process and graduate. So
mm,
we're in a grad school. The archetypes would represent our teachers because they represent aspects of the spiritual journey, which is what we're learning. We're learning how, and that's why Ra said they gave the major arcana of the tarot. That was given by
mm,
Ra in ancient Egypt. Just the first 22 cards
mm,
were given to help us understand the archetypal energies that we are working through and how they progress from gaining conscious awareness to mastering your spiritual journey. It's all written out.
mm.
And these archetypes, we do play them. And not only that, I took this beautiful course by a wonderful man. He's passed over now, but his name was Sam Christensen. And this was in my acting days. And the point of the course for actors was to help us align to our archetypal energy. So when we went for auditions, we would audition for roles that we would have a higher chance of getting because we
Oh,
all carry these archetypal stories. You do too. Every human being does. And he had this
interesting.
great process of, and what he explained is we go through all the stories in the world, but there's one story, archetypal story, our life is telling
Mm,
the most. And then we're learning the others from other people. And mine was, I really had a hard time with mine because I was like, oh man, this is rough. But the archetypal energy, and it's a polarity. So there is a strong side and a sort of like a positive and a negative to each one's polarity. But mine was clarity and delusion, which I had a really hard time with that being my archetypal story. But though he explained it best, he said, Therese, if the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg was auditioning, you would audition for the role that Whoopi Goldberg had. Same role
mm,
of the
mm.
person who can see what's going on, but nobody believes them. And isn't it funny? Like now I do this same work where I'm like, I channel with the Arcturian Council, and I'm sure there's people out there whose eyes are rolling so hard
Yeah,
as I say that because they're just like, whatever, like, what are you smoking?
yeah, yeah.
And yet, that's the kind of work I do. So I'm getting a lot of clarity, but
Right.
not everybody is going to believe the information
Mm.
I get, which is a story we all live. Everybody's had those moments where they're like, I saw a light in the sky, it zipped and zigzagged, and I swear to God I saw it. And then the mom and dad are like, sure, honey,
Yeah.
sure. Or there was a ghost under my bed. Uh-huh. Yeah, sure.
I so I've got I always want to say that there's something wrong with my brain, and which there is, but I I have like unusually early childhood memories.
I do
Uh
too. Me
like
too.
very I remember nursing. I
I
remember
don't remember that, thankfully. I remember sucking
yeah,
on my toes, which I have not. I
really.
yeah, I can remember
I
my
can,
fur
yeah,
being
I can
coming
remember
out.
being able to fit my whole foot in my mouth.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember teaching myself how to walk. I remember
Wow.
I remember crawling in the grass. I've got a whole episode about like eating grass and all that kind of stuff. But
I
one
love
of my one of my earliest childhood memories, and this is before my parents split up, so I think it would have been like 2.5 or so, is seeing shadows flying around our house. And I remember trying to explain it to my sister, and she's like, "There's nothing there." And I'm like, "No, there's like," and I remember it very, very clearly. It was like a crow, but it was only a shadow, and it like landed on the TV, and it landed on the couch behind my mom, and it was just kind of like going. And I remember looking at it going around. I'm like, "That's really weird," and trying to point it out to my sister, and they're like, "No, you don't see that." I'm like, "I totally see that right now."
Oh
You
God.
know, that's the thing.
That's so
Yeah,
interesting because yeah, my parents divorced when I was about 4,
yeah.
just maybe just turning 5, and I have the same memories in the house that we were in before uh,
Mm,
the divorce. And so I remember every night there was always somebody standing in my doorway watching me. I could
mm,
hear voices and hear them talking to me. I was the kid that was constantly trying to get in bed with my parents because
mm,
I did not like how busy and how much traffic there was in the house.
mm.
And I specifically remember the part that I'm so sad it went away. I remember I used to talk to these little tiny beings. I'm pretty sure they were fairies, but I would talk to them outside. They'd always be in the plants.
Hmm.
And my grandmother at her house, she had a thing for those garden gnomes, those
Hmm.
guys who are everywhere. But she
Yeah,
had made little houses that are, the gnome village, but these little beings would hang out at these houses. They like loved it.
really.
And I would talk to him all the time. And I just remember it kind of fading away
Yeah.
and recalling it and going, man, I wish I could get that back. But it's like I can't
Mm,
see in that dimension anymore.
yeah. Yeah. I'm torn on a lot of that kind of stuff. I
Well, you can turn it. So for those listening, these things are not blocked from us. They're just muscles that don't get used anymore. So as a kid, we were
mm,
on, you know what I mean? The veil was very thin, the muscles were working easily, and seeing the, interdimensional crow flying around was easy for you to do.
mm,
As we get older, we're not taught also that these skills are something to maintain. And so
yeah.
without them being purposely worked on like a muscle, if you don't go to the gym, you don't get the ripped abs and biceps. You have to work on that. And it's the same with our
Especially after 50.
right. And it is this, but it is also the same with our extrasensory abilities. Everybody has them. Some people still have active muscles because they use it more frequently, but we can turn these things back on with it takes practice and effort, it takes meditation, it takes, trying to see it and not seeing it until you develop that muscle again.
Mhm.
That's what happened to me. So in college and as I was pursuing my acting career, this wasn't a focus. So those things naturally sort of fuzzed out, and talking and hearing spirit wasn't a thing I was focused on. And then I got really into it again. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. I want that back. And I opened it up and I started training on it. And it got to the point where I was too open. And then I'd be laying in bed at night and the people would be back. And I'm like,
Mm,
nope. So I had to find that happy medium where I
yeah.
had to learn to open the muscle, but also create boundaries and say, this is my daytime. This is me time. This is family time. There's only certain hours where I will open it up fully. And what it means is I'm not one of those mediums who walks around at the grocery store and sees your dead grandmother next to you. I'm not that person
Right.
because I have closed, I've put boundaries up. But, if I get into the space and open myself up fully, then I can communicate.
Hmm.
But you could too. Everybody can, not everybody wants to.
Yeah. I have a very good friend who went to a training a training program down in Mexico to learn what do you call it? EOV,
Remote
extraocular.
viewing, like the
I'm sorry.
remote viewing protocols.
No. Like extraocular viewing. So you see with like a blindfold, but you can still
Okay.
see.
Yes.
And I have experienced that. I was doing a lot of Joe Dispenza meditations, doing I was doing marathon meditations, like an hour and a half every day.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
remember I came down one morning, and it was shortly after I had had an experience with like the Kundalini energy. Like I found, like he talks about having that, like that full body orgasm. Like I had
Yeah.
experienced that, and I was like, that was really intense. But it was a few days after that that I was I was sitting there. I'd been only been meditating for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, like the lights came on in the room. And I had to check because I'm like, my eyes are definitely closed, but I
Right.
could see the room like in full living, like it was like I was in full living color. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like somebody looking around the room, and I could see it was just as if I was looking around the room, but and checking, making sure my eyes were definitely closed.
I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar, but your pineal gland has rods and cones in it, just like the eye. And that's why it's called the third eye. There's literal rods and cones of light perception in the pineal gland. And then we've got those piezoelectric crystals in there where when the pineal gland is working and it's like kind of squeezing, it bumps these crystals together and they emit light and color in the
Yeah.
third eye, which is why we are able to fully see without our eyes, which is so crazy to me. I mean, it's kind of amazing what human beings can do, and most of us have no idea that we've
Have
got
you?
these really cool features.
Oh man, I feel like we could talk for days. So
Totally.
this so in Joe Dispenza's work, he talks about doing the he wants you to like flex your
Yes, I love that one.
and
It makes
bring all that fluid up,
pull
right?
it up the straw, right? Pull
Like
it up
pull
the
up the
spinal
straw,
cord,
because you're using that to put pressure on the um
pineal gland.
pineal gland to pressurize those crystals, because that's what's going to help, right?
Yeah.
I my brain is one of those ones that I do not do well with THC. I do not like marijuana. It's like a psychedelic for me.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
but what's interesting is that I had experimented with that a little bit. Um, I had experimented with putting pressure on the pineal gland before I found Joe Dispenza, because one of the things I found is that when I smoke marijuana, my eyes roll back in my head, but like forcefully, like I can't stop them. Like they're
Mm,
like just, and it's painful. They're
yeah.
just like rolled back in my head, and I'm like, oh, this is like really really uncomfortable. But what happens is I have really intense visions, very very intense visions, and my senses change a lot. Like I well, you want a quick story? It's
Yeah, do it.
okay. Ugh.
This is so great.
Yeah. So so I was in the military for 23 years. Never smoked, and because I didn't want to ruin my career.
Yeah.
But then when I got out, I'm in New Jersey, and it was, legalized, and my wife is a total pothead. And uh
Love you, honey.
yeah, I'm like, hey babe, what do you got? So I thought, man, I'll try a hit. Why not? So I took like one little, and that was it. And man, the room was just like woo, just like glowing, and I had to go lay down. And that first time, it took me, I got like a tour of consciousness. I could see, there was, oh man, this is the craziest. I want to make an episode all about this, but I was in this void, and there was a path in front of me, and up ahead of me there was this impossibly huge yin yang symbol that was just kind of like roiling and like moving, and it was like kind of flowing in and out of itself like constantly, and it was loud, like it was like like this huge yin yang symbol, right? And anyway, and I felt the compulsion to walk towards it, but I was in this complete void. But every time and I was scared, but every time I took a step forward, a brick would zoom in and like appear right underneath my foot. I was like,
Mm.
oh, that's cool. So I started experimenting, and every time I took a step, a brick would land right in front of my foot. So like the road was just like literally being paved right in front of me. So I'm like, okay. So I just started walking. But then what I noticed is that my my mind would wander kind of back and forth, and I couldn't keep my balance. And what I noticed is that I found out that I could in this vision, I could control the direction I was going by the emotion that I held in my heart.
Very accurate to what we go through. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found that, but the weird thing was that if I remember, I talked a little bit about having that straight and narrow path.
Mhm.
This is the one of the things that really drove this home for me, like this straight and narrow path, is that if I let myself be like too overjoyed, if I let any emotion, if it was joy or anger or sorrow or love or happiness or anything, if I let any emotion get too high, if it was a negative emotion, I would start to lean over towards the left, and I would like, but the further I went over, it was like this pit of darkness that got
Mm.
like deeper and deeper and closer, and I could hear like screams coming from that, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm not gonna. Phew, that was scary as hell.
Right.
But then when even if I had a positive emotion, I'd go over to the right, and it was the same thing. I would go too far over, and I'd start to drift, but it was in like the same abyss, but still the same screaming and screaming coming from it. So I have to like center myself back up again. I'm like, oh, I got to be even tempered. I got to stay even keeled. I can't let any emotion get too high or too low as I keep moving towards this, this yin yang in the front side. And that was marijuana that did that to me.
Yeah, because you're highly
Yeah.
sensitive people. We have to be very careful
Yeah.
with that kind of stuff. For me, marijuana, if I had to take a full dose of it, like, a lot of times if you go to these dispensaries, they make a dose. Like I use the edible stuff,
Hmm.
but I cannot take a full dose of that. I have an allergic reaction, and I'm
Yeah.
like, but I get the blend with the CBD in it. So it's like
Hmm.
THC with CBD. And I wanted to
Yeah.
take that for health and for sleeping. So I found my team was like, take half and see what
Oh,
happens. And so
really?
I
Hmm.
took half, much better for me. But what I find was really interesting in it is I find it very helpful for becoming aware of the patterns in myself I want to shift. Like they show me all
Mm.
the time. This is the mindset block that's keeping you stuck. This is why you're still playing with feelings of like unworthiness or not enoughness. It's this belief that you're
Really?
holding that you don't even see. So I get
Yeah.
a lot of that information from that. But speaking of Aaron Abke, he started doing like a ceremony using cannabis and breath work because they've discovered that there's DMT molecules in our lungs. We have DMT, which is
Hmm.
another, psychedelic that people do, but we have it naturally. And there's a large amount in the lungs. And he found that using cannabis and breath work together helps unlock it. So
Really?
yeah, I've tried
Interesting.
it. I've tried to do it. I mean, I haven't taken his course, but I was like, let me see if I can, because I do like Wim Hof breathing. And I'm like, I could
Yeah,
just
yeah,
Wim Hof and take some take some THC and Wim Hof and you go somewhere. I don't know if
yeah.
I got what I was supposed to get.
For my from my experience, I would that first experience was like scary and profound for me.
Mm,
So once a month, I was, I'm like, I'm gonna try this again. And I did it 4 or 5 times. I did it 5 times. And each time I was shown something different,
yeah.
and which is a whole like just mind blowing stuff.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you, I had this, I took it one time with a friend and we would meditate together and we would connect in energy. And this was like before I was starting to channel. This was sort of the precursor to channeling, was we would do these connections in meditation, and I would allow the messages to come through because I felt safer when someone was doing it with me. I needed a
Mm,
buddy at the time. Now I'm okay. But I made the mistake once of trying to look at the earth from like not instead of from on the earth, trying to zoom out and see what the earth looked like from a
mm-hmm.
distance. What happened to me was I saw an infinity of Earths all lined up next to each other. And my teacher
Mm,
goes, these are all the dimensions. There's like parallel dimensions happening. And these are all, and I freaked out because I'm like, which one am I on? Like I
yeah,
didn't know where to go back. And I'm like, this is freaking me out that we all think there's just one thing happening here. And it's all of our choices, like that move, the movies that talk about like slipping through dimensions are always ones that fascinate me. Anything that really talks
yeah.
about metaphysical principles, I'm always fascinated by. But even just okay, more recently, Doctor Strange slipping
Mm,
through dimensions, right? This is
yeah,
they tell us little bits of the truth all the time, and they put it in our entertainment so that we can
yeah.
kind of, it's like being spoon fed what's going
Mm-hmm.
on without having to freak out and go, oh my God, there's like all these different dimensions, and simply making certain choices puts you on one or the other. And we're making it constantly. And we don't even realize that we're taking these fractile shifts into a higher dimension, a lower dimension. And like you said, it's the emotion
Yeah.
that is making us a frequency match. So part of it's a choice, and the other part is the emotional response to that choice is telling
Mm,
you if you're in the higher timeline or a lower one. And this is where we get like the Mandela effect, because
mm,
we have shifted, not just individually, but we shift as a group.
mm,
And we leave there's little remnants of where we were and where we are. And that's where it gets like, it just gets really wild. And
yeah,
I saw that in one of those THC trips, and I was like, I'll never do that again. I'm never
yeah,
gonna take it and try to go
yeah,
look at the earth again. It's too
yeah. Not
much.
gonna. I Yeah, well, the last time I smoked, well, that's not true. I smoked one more time to try and get, because I was trying to get more information,
Yeah.
And I went someplace and there was another entity there, and I was in like some kind of control room or something like that, and this entity kept telling me you're not supposed to be here. And because I was like downloading information like how to build organic spaceships and how to travel through time, like I had all this information, and this entity was like, you're not supposed to be here, you need to not be doing
I don't
this
have the
right now.
clearance. Yeah.
Yeah. And probably like 2 weeks later I smoked again, but that time was the single most horrifying experience of my life. I felt like every molecule of my body was about to explode. And you couldn't get off of it. It's not like when you're drunk and you can just be like, I'm gonna go for a walk and get rid of this, or just like
Oh,
barf, and
in
you
your
can kind of
system.
calm down a little bit. Like when you're here, you're like you're riding this train, bro. Like you're on this.
Yeah, and it's a long ride.
Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe that was a one-off. So about a month later, I tried it one more time. And that time I think I experienced the closest thing that I can describe what a psychotic break must be. Like I honestly didn't know. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I had just done something incredibly violent, or if I had just come from work, or if I had just woken up. Like I had literally had no idea what was happening at all.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there in my room. I was like polishing my shoes. And my wife would come in and check on me, and I'm like, hi, just just polishing my shoes, babe. It's
Right.
fine. Because that was the only thing that kind of kept me grounded here in reality. And after that, I was like, okay, so maybe my higher consciousness, my higher self was like, no, bro, like you didn't listen to me. So now guess what? You try to come up here again, you're gonna have problems. So now I'm
Well,
like, message received. Like
you're like, peace out. Yeah.
I'm
No,
I'm
I
good.
mean, I would definitely follow that inner prompting. I found for me, I wanted to use it to help with my sleep because I do a
Mm,
lot in my sleep. We do a lot when we're sleeping.
mm,
Number one, some of us have jobs while we're asleep. We're,
mm,
off planet. I know a lot of people assist people who are transitioning by
mm,
being in the astral state. We're learning, we're going to other places. And so it was to the point where I felt like I couldn't get a deep sleep. I was always in that between awake and asleep state. So I wanted it
mm,
to help me with the sleep. And I found when my team was like, take half. And again, like I would never smoke it because you can't really control the dosage. So
mm,
it's all about that dosage control for me. And that's when it was like, no, here's the subtle mind opening thing you need to see. Here's
mm.
where you're being like, my team is always, they love my husband very much, as do I. But you know how married life can be. Sometimes you get on each other's nerves and you're like,
Nah,
sometimes
perfect.
you forget how much you appreciate someone. And my team's always very much like, look at what you're doing. This is a perspective you're holding. Like, give him a break, go give him some love. Like, remember, right? Remember that you're in this together. And it's
Yeah.
those kinds of things that will come through now, where it's very much about
Oh, I see.
my own personal growth, my own personal, like how to get out of my own way.
Hmm.
Because we all intend to be good people, doesn't mean we're always on our best behavior. You know what I mean?
Speak
So,
for yourself, lady.
yeah.
I have moments like that from time to time where I'll be frustrated with Kelly, and I'm just like, this is why. Remind me again why I'm doing this. This is ridiculous, you know. But then um I'll meet somebody, just I work in construction management, so I mean like a lot of people, you know. And I'll meet a lady, and she just like start telling me about her life or her perspectives or her whatever, and I'm like, God damn, I'm glad I have Kelly. Like,
Right. That's
or like one of the guys will tell me about his like relationship troubles and all the stuff that his wife is putting him through, and I'm just like, oof, Kelly would never. And yeah, so I get those little reminders, and so everyone's probably like once a month, I come home and I'm like, babe, I love you so much. Like you have no idea.
how much I appreciate you.
Yeah, and I know that I haven't been telling you, and that you've been on my nerves lately, and I know I've been on your nerves lately, but I'm so thankful that I found you and we made a commitment to this because wow, it's
That's
sketchy
the
out there.
beauty. That's the beauty of having other perspectives available, right? It really
Mm,
helps us
yeah.
recommit to ourselves because we have it better than we sometimes realize when
Oh
it's
yeah.
that ability to take things for granted. But this reminds me, did you ever hear about, I wanted to ask you this a bit ago and I forgot. Did you ever hear of the backfill people or the backdrop people?
Like the NPCs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heard of this theory?
Yeah.
Because okay, we were talking
Well, I've
about
I've heard two
archetypes.
different ideas of it.
Yeah. Okay, tell me yours.
Well, I've got two different understandings of it.
Okay.
One is that, have you seen that episode? You know, Rick and Morty, the
I've heard
show.
of it, but I haven't watched it.
So there's this show called Rick and Morty, and Rick is this like super mega smart scientist, and his grandson is named Morty, and they go on these incredible adventures in different dimensions and with aliens and all that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
So Rick takes Morty to this intergalactic video arcade, and there's a game where you can put on a helmet, and in that helmet you become somebody else.
They ripped that off of Red Dwarf. Did you
Yeah,
ever I
totally
love
ripped it off of Red Dwarf.
that.
Yeah,
That's the Despair Squid episode. That's like one of my favorites. Okay, go ahead. Got
yeah.
it.
So yeah, so when Morty's doing it, it kind of picks up, and this guy, I think the guy's like Norm or something like that. The guy in the video game, the person that you become, is like 5 years old, and he had a weird dream. He was telling his mom, he's like, I had a weird dream. I was with a grandfather and we were traveling, but then he just like lives his whole life, and he
Yes.
meets a girl, and he's on the football team, and he gets a job at his father-in-law's carpet store, and gets cancer, and just lives like this life, and then dies. But then as soon as he dies, like the helmet pops off, and Morty's like, what? Like, what was? And he's only been in the chair for like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yes.
But then Rick sits down, and he's like, this is how it's done. And he goes in and he like just goes like bonkers, like doesn't have a social security number. He's just like living on the edge the whole time. People are like, man, he's getting a high score. So in but going back to the NPC, I've heard a theory that NPCs, non-player characters, are the ones that are kind of like the Morty version, where you're just like doing your thing, you don't think, you accept the programming that you've had, you believe in Jesus, and you make sure your kids get baptized and you pay your taxes on time, and you get a nice 30-year mortgage and you don't buck the system, and like those people. And God bless them. Like, we need people like that in the world, right?
Right.
Um but so some people think that those are the NPCs, that they're not
Okay.
doing anything drastic with their life, they're just channeling through.
Okay.
But then other people think that there are just like straight up background characters, like you have in like Legend of Zelda, that
Yes.
are just
Just
yeah,
walking
like
around.
bumping into walls. Like as soon as you look away, they're just like think, think. Have you seen The Good Place?
I love The Good Place. I'm
Yeah,
watching it again right
it's
now.
like
Yeah.
it's like Derek.
Derek. Maximum Derek. I freaking love Derek, but Derek's more advanced than I would say an NPC is. But it is like when Janet starts spitting out all the people that they need to generate to make it look like the good
Yeah.
place is filled.
And then when Derek's trying
Absolutely.
to run the show, I think the lady's just bucking into her like, hello.
Derek becomes like a universal consciousness at the end. He's like, all points are Derek. Derek is the beginning, and Derek is the end. I freaking love Derek.
Uh,
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I did not know that some people were okay, so that makes sense in some of the memes I see now, because I didn't know that some people were saying NPCs are people who just can't buck the program. They're just
yeah,
playing the game the way the game tells you to play it. I didn't
right.
know that. I would say, okay, in my opinion, that would be more like people in the law of one who stay neutral. They never do. So in order to
Mm,
polarize, you either go at least the lowest score you can get to polarize positive is 51% service to others, meaning 51% of your life was at least doing something for someone else or for a greater cause or for the higher levels of humanity, which is
right.
a really easy score to get if you think about it. It means you just put a little more effort to get to 51%, meaning 49% of your life can be completely selfish, but if
Right.
51%, you've polarized. Okay, to polarize negative is 95%. You have to achieve 95% service to self, meaning you
Oh, yeah.
really have to commit to being an asshole,
Yeah.
basically to do that path. You
Pretty
really
much.
see yourself as separate from everything, really.
Hmm.
And then the neutrals would be what I would call maybe the NPCs who never actually find the levers of power. They just it's 50-50, right?
Well, it's like Eleanor would say, you basic.
Yeah, basic, right. So, but when I hear that though, I still see those as people. What
Mm,
I get with the background people is more like what Dolores Cannon was talking about, and I still can't wrap my brain around it. But I do believe we live in a simulation. And my team has said the easiest way to understand it is it's a computer game. Think of it like that. You're playing an
mm,
avatar. Your higher self is the actual player. You're safe and sound, but you're playing at life like it's real. But we're more like Rick and Morty or Red Dwarf, where we've got the control helmet on and we're living as if we're Sean and Therese, but we're actually something else playing this game.
yeah.
And
Well,
the
we're
unique,
the one who's telling me that you shouldn't be in here.
right, exactly. So
Yeah.
you're like, don't go to that room. Go, why,
Yeah,
why are you
what are you
going?
doing?
Exactly.
You're getting a rose tattoo on your ankle? Are you serious?
Like,
Really, dude?
but the cool thing about our computer game is that what that we don't experience here on Earth is that in this computer game, we as the avatar can turn around to our higher self and go, stop doing that. I don't want to go off the
Mm,
cliff again. I don't want to run into the wall. I don't want to keep picking these relationships that aren't right for me. I want to advance. Like we actually can have a two-way conversation with our
mm,
higher self player person. The background people, as I understand it, are literally just made up into to fill in the space. So that there's actually less people, real people here than it seems, which
mm.
I don't really know how to wrap my brain around that because I can't figure out the way that she said you would sort of know is that they're like background, like extras in a movie.
Mhm.
And that they're not having a full experience. They're having some consciousness, but not full consciousness. And you almost never interact with them. So there's people in the world that you'll never interact with. And I still can't wrap my brain around it because I'm like, well, then wouldn't I be a background person in somebody else's life?
Yeah, that's see, I get leery about that idea. I like the idea. There's another movie that came out. Oh, I forget what it's called. Was it Ready Player One? I think something like that. But
Yeah, with Ryan Reynolds, right?
yeah, yeah, and he gets the
I haven't seen
glasses,
it, but
and
I want to.
he's basically an NPC.
Right,
But there's all these people that keep coming into a city, and there's like robbing banks and going crazy, but they have these sunglasses, and he puts the sunglasses on, and he gets kind of like gains consciousness and gains sentience and can like has these powers, and it's
right.
ruining the whole game. But that's an interesting. To me, it kind of breaks down the metaphor really well.
Well,
But
and talked about that too. She said that they have the ability to actually gain consciousness. So
yeah,
it's a, I just thought I'd bring it up because that's one of those out there things where it's like, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around how that,
it's that movie does a really good job of kind of breaking down that idea,
I
and
gotta,
in a silly Ryan Reynolds kind of way.
yeah.
But yeah, when you get that to the end, you're like, oh, okay, that's okay. That's what it is. My concern with that idea is that it slips dangerously close to solipsism, which frightens me.
Tell me what that is
So,
because I'm familiar.
solipsism is the idea that I, Sean Helgerson, in this body, am actually the only person,
Ah, yeah.
and nobody else is even real. Like everything else is a projection, which just can go lots of dark places very
That
quick.
can. I have a different take on that. One, there is one person here, but it's the oneness, right? So it's source itself.
Mm,
And it's, the sources, oh God, what was, there was like a poem about this where a man was like, I went somewhere and I met this person and I had this experience and it turned out it was me. Like I met myself.
mm,
And so the whole idea here is that we're all parts of source walking around, but it's really just source that's here. There is
mm,
no actual Sean or actual Therese. It's aspects of source coming up to each other and experiencing each other. But there is only one sort of entity, if you will, ultimately having an experience. It's
mm,
just that from our level of consciousness, we don't experience the oneness. We see the separation so that we can sort of chronicle that experience because the whole
mm,
idea is to get information. What does this perspective look like? What does this one look like? Right. So
mm.
I'm actually gathering information for the universe about you as you're gathering it about me so
Right.
that we then catalog that somewhere that at one point in time, Therese Tucker existed, and this is the trajectory of everything that she thought, felt, saw, did, reacted to, responded to, learned from.
Mm,
And that's what one strand of source looks like.
mm. You're gonna really love Tom Campbell.
Yeah, I wrote it down. I'm going to read
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're gonna have to. The way that he describes that is because he's a physicist, and he describes it in terms of entropy. And what we're part of our evolutionary process, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to lower the entropy of the universe. And you do that by learning how to love a little bit more, and then love a little bit more, and then love a little bit more. Um, yeah, that's a fascinating concept. But there was something else I was gonna say too. I forget what it was. We're coming up on more than 2 hours,
This happens when you get in
right?
conversation. It's like, where did the time go?
I know. I used to my daughter and I have our personal record for a marathon conversation was 7.5 hours.
That's
You're
impressive.
like on the phone, walking around. You gotta like charge. You gotta put the charger back into the phone to keep the conversation going. Um,
I got to tell you, this is kind of wild. So I do have somehow a knack for using up a lot of time without realizing it with people.
mhm.
And so I'm a QHHT practitioner. I'm level 1. That's Dolores
Oh,
Cantor's work,
yep.
the quantum healing hypnosis. And when I went in for my personal session with the practitioner, we started at the usual time and she said we'd be done. So we started at like 10 a.m. and she said
Mhm,
expect to be done around like 2, maybe 3. And Dolores was always it takes the time it takes, you know.
mhm,
So we do the pre-interview part, which is the first, just getting to know you part, take a bathroom break. That was probably, let's see, if we started at 10, that was 11:30. And then the next part is she puts me under hypnosis and then asks all the questions. So we're doing it. She's in charge. She's got her phone with her and she's asking me the questions. It seems pretty normal. We get out, it's 7 p.m. 10 hours had passed. And I was like, what the
wow.
hell? Like, what happened? Because it did not feel
Yeah,
like she was baffled. Like, where did that time go? And I'm like, I don't know. I was laying there. You're in charge. Like,
yeah.
I don't
That's
know how.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So tell me, all right. So, hi, Therese. Welcome to Finding Fuscata.
Oh, thank you. Here.
Today, listeners, my guest. No, but tell me, tell me about. I'm so glad I actually remembered. See, this is why I got to remember to hit record. Tell me about what you do. I mean, I've been looking at your website and reading some of the bio and looking at all this kind of stuff. And quite honestly, I am, I'm skeptical of a lot of this stuff. My wife is into a lot of these kinds of things, but um, like I kind of, because I'm more analytical. That's why Tom Campbell, appeals to me because he's got the math to back everything up, and I'm less in tune with Rob because there's no numbers. But I get it. You know what I mean?
Rob, bring us numbers. We need the data first.
I need data. I'm still part of me is still very much left brain, but um, so yeah. So tell me what it is that you do. You're a psychic medium.
Yes. So more than that. So there's a lot I do. I'm sort of a Renaissance woman, I guess, because there's a lot of ways that I show up in the world. So I'm an artist. I also design jewelry. I also am a self-empowerment coach. I really focus on helping people develop self-trust.
Mm,
My goal is to help people connect to their team and spirit, their higher messages. I really feel like part of the reason I'm here is to break down this barrier between some people are gifted psychically and some are not. And I don't believe
mm,
that. I believe that that's another wedge that gets put between people and their natural abilities. So I really want to facilitate people and help them understand how much one, these abilities, these extrasensory abilities we have were given to all of humanity to help us navigate
mm,
this realm, because there is a lot of unseen. There's
mm,
more than the physical, as you say. We're getting more and more clear about just how much frequency is
mm,
actually at play here, especially if you're familiar with like the observer effect, one of my favorites,
mm,
right? What we observe about something we end up like helping create.
mm,
Um, so a lot of people have a hard time making big decisions in their life that kind of take them out of maybe take them off road. Maybe that's a good way to think about it. But like maybe you have a set path and yet your heart tells you you are supposed to be, going on this lifelong safari in Africa, but you work as a bank manager and it's you
mm,
have, it just these two things don't correlate, but you feel this deep calling in your heart.
mhm,
And you don't trust it because there's fear around it and there's different types of fear. So part of what I do with people is I actually help them to understand, get clarity on what's going on inside of them, find out where these impulses are coming from. Like what's the mindset? What's the mental blockages? What are you listening to? Because we have different things inside of us pulling. We have an ego, right? That's going to pull us in a different direction than our higher self. So how do I separate the two and know which one is guiding me
Hmm.
and which one to listen to? Because both have pretty convincing stories to tell me. And both are utilizing my desire as well as my fear. So
Hmm.
that's the work I do with people, is the coaching. That sometimes looks like a coaching program that I'm doing with someone individually. Other times, all they want to do is sit down for a reading and get some clarity. That's another way I work with people. I also work with people on utilizing energy and sort of listening to the messages of the cosmos, and that's in my spirit circles, which are where the live channeling is happening. That's where the Arcturians are coming through, and they're talking a lot about the process that we're going through at this time, because we haven't even touched on the fact that on a cellular level, we're actually changing into a different type of being. And it could very well be because, yes, in this certain part of this Oort cloud that we're in, it has an effect on our physical chemistry. But whatever the cause, there is actually a change happening within us. We're moving from carbon to a crystalline plasma type entity, or rainbow body, or when Jesus ascends and he moves into his rainbow body, that's very much where we're going. And this is a both a physical and a non-physical state, but to be able to do it at will, which is a whole other topic to talk about.
Hmm.
The Arcturians talk to us about this a lot, especially during these sessions, and predominantly what they're interested in talking about is helping ease us through this process, because it's the first time humanity's attempting to shift the body as a group. People do it individually. Jesus did it, Buddha's done it, many Tibetan monks have achieved it, but it's
Baba G.
all been on an individual level. So the really cool thing about our time period, what makes it so unique, is that not only are we ascending to a higher level of consciousness, there is an attempt to take the body with us by transmuting the body at this time. So the Arcturians are
Mm.
very concerned with helping us go through this process and ease it for ourselves by sort of giving us advice on how to handle it, and also explaining, okay, this is what's happening at this time. That comes through a lot during the spirit circles. And that is something that anyone can join. There is a join as you wish option, or there's a membership option that people can do there. And then, of course, I have my own podcast called the Modern Mystic Soul Podcast. And I talk about these concepts. A lot of the channelings from the Arcturians, after they've happened, I will load them up to the podcast.
Really?
Yeah, so you can hear exactly what they're saying and kind of get, see if it resonates for you. And then I also interview people as well on the show.
I wonder if, man, you're getting all these like firsts out of me.
Magic. No.
Okay. So here's another thing that I've never told anybody.
Okay. Love it.
I have another tattoo. No, I don't.
Got me with that one. I was like,
I
okay.
secretly identify as a houseplant. I'm a fern. Call me Fernie. Um, no, God, why can't I say this? I mm, I have channeled in the past. I used to record myself. I never did anything with them, but I have hours and hours and hours of MP3s that are, of course, on a computer that's broken now, where I was just talking. I would just go into my room, turn on the microphone, close my eyes, like hooded in the dark, and then just start to talk and just see what came. And I would listen to it afterwards, and I'm like, holy, like I didn't know that I knew that stuff. But it wasn't anything weird who's the guy with like the bald head and
Oh, Bashir, right?
Bashir. Yeah, it wasn't like Bashir where I like took on a different personality, or like it wasn't a different voice. It was just me, just kind of like it felt like me just riffing, but
Mhm.
even in the moment, I wasn't aware what I was saying.
That's okay. So let's pause there because that's a really good point. There are lots of different types of channeling. There's
Mm,
conscious channels like you and I, we're a conscious channel. And then there's the unconscious channel like Carla Ruckert, who brought through the law of one. Now, she actually, her soul, she sort of went out of her body. So she did an astral projection out and Ra
hmm.
would come through. And they were all, that's why they were always like protection and is she safe? And
Oh, that's right.
I need the
She had to
alignments.
wear like the right clothes, and there had to be water close
There
by.
had to, the
Yeah.
Bible had to be open to a certain page. The incense had to be pointed in a certain direction. All these things were affecting their ability to stream through her while she was sort of safely tucked outside. But it's very dangerous to do that
Hmm.
because if the wrong entity comes in, they can kind of push you out of the body. So that's not
Right.
the kind of channeling you were doing or myself. The kind of channeling we do is almost like imagine we're in a car together and
Mm.
we're driving, and then we're like, okay, I'm going to let you drive. And we get in the back seat, meaning I'm still conscious. I can hear what's being said, but I'm not really paying attention.
Mm.
Trying to let them drive while also controlling the vehicle. I'm somehow in the back seat and still have control of this car, meaning I can make it start,
Oh,
I can make it stop, but
I
I'm
okay.
letting you drive me a little bit.
I know. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. When I was, I don't know if this was a trauma response or what it was, but I have all as long as I remember had the ability to separate from my physicality. Like I would have these moments where I could just kind of do what I will, like right now, where I can just look at my body as being something else that's not really attached to me.
Hmm.
And it used to be, well, I remember when it first started happening when I was very, very young and thinking, well, this is a strange experience, you know. But then being able to just kind of play with it, and now I can just kind of do it at will. And for a while, I was having I was going through a lot of mental health crises, and I used to think that maybe that was part of the reason, like there was something wrong with my brain that I could do that. But now that you say that, you use that analogy of getting in the back seat. That's exactly what was happening. It was that same kind of thing where I dislocated, the
Hmm.
part of me that's looking through the eyeballs right now kind of stepped back a little bit, and then something else like took over and was driving.
All the
But I
time.
was,
So
but I was still there.
I used to get in trouble for, I would go into trance all the time. I'd be daydreaming, like I'd be in school and I'd just sort of glaze over and I'd be gone, like I'd be out the window doing something else and just kind of sitting there. And I remember getting called on that, like, at the time my nickname was Tracy. So it was like, Tracy, pay attention, stop spacing out. Like I was Spacey Tracy for a long time as a
Nice.
kid
Yeah.
because it was kind of boring. I mean, whatever we were doing at the time wasn't enough to hold my attention, but it was more than just thinking about um, a TV show I liked or my toys or something like that. It was like I'm fully off out of the, I'm now walking in that garden out there. I'm out
Mm.
there and enjoying that. But that's astral projection. And what you were also talking about is disassociation, which does happen with people when they have trauma, this they disassociate from it. So there's a difference between the disassociation that happens from trauma, where it's a protection mechanism, and then there is a sort of conscious disassociate, meaning like I am now allowing something to come through. It's like I'm the radio
Mm.
and I'm tuning off of my regular station and onto another one.
Right. Yeah. I used to use that. I totally forgot about this. Uh, when I was still heavily involved in the Christian church, I would one of the things that they tell you when you grow up in the evangelical church, is that you should always have a sermon in your pocket just in case you got to like witness for Christ or whatever the thing is, so I always practice that. I was always, have a sermon in your pocket ready to go. And there are, I don't know how many times that there'd be an opportunity to talk to somebody, or there'd be, I'd have to cover a Bible study, or there would be, I'd be like at a youth group and somebody would say, oh, the guest speaker isn't here, Sean, can you say something, and it was that same thing where I could just turn on, and I'm like, just give me a word, just give me a verse, and then I could just like, I would step back and these words would just flow through me. And the
Mm.
thing is that it would tie itself together at the end. It was like this beautiful package that just kind of like came out that made sense, and it was profound, and there'd be people crying, and I'm like, I don't even know what I
That,
just said.
so that's
I could
clear.
never repeat it. It's just a one-time message that just like came through for these people, you know?
That's claircognizance. Yes, that's one
Oh.
of our extrasensory abilities.
So
And
am
this,
I claircognizant then?
yes, claircognizant. So claircognizant is when just the
I just
information
unlocked a superpower. Yeah.
drops, right? It's great. I remember one time I was playing Trivial Pursuit, and the question was, "What's the capital of Iceland?" And I just blurted out Reykjavik, and I didn't know, but that was right. And I remember going, "How the heck did I get that?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I've come to rely on that. In fact, it got me through my military career because I mean I have a hard time with retention. If I'm reading, like if I'm reading something and it's like data, I have a hard time retaining it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I can recall it quickly, even if I don't know why. But I end up being a very good test taker because as long as I've read the material or
Yeah,
listened to it,
yeah.
like I know that it's in there, and I can take the test and I'll be like, okay, yep, that's the one, that's the one. No idea. Like I don't even have to finish reading the question. I'm like, yep, that's the answer. Yep, that seems like, yep. And then I end up being, best of the average. I'm a solid B+ student, but just relying heavily on that to get me through everything in life so far, you know?
Beautiful. Yeah, claircognizance. This is our ability to tap in. So this is where it gets really interesting because they say our DNA is more like an antenna. It's not
Mhm.
what holds the genetic material.
Yes.
It's the antenna. And the genetic material is actually floating around us,
Yeah.
more like a soup, if you will, like inside our aura is where the genetic material is.
Yeah.
So outside the body, the DNA acts as an antenna. In that genetic material is the Akashic record. So when people say I'm
Mm.
reading the Akashic records, your genetic material, your DNA, it holds all the information that ever is, was, or will be. When you had that dream where, or the experience where the being was like, you're not supposed to be here right now, I've also had that for a different reason. I was in the Akashic records in a section that I was not cleared to be in. So
Mm.
there's information that we're not supposed to receive. Maybe it's because it's so irrelevant to our current life that it wouldn't serve us in any way to have it, or we're not ready to receive it because we couldn't handle the information. But
Yeah.
all of us have access to all of it.
Yeah.
And
What
the claircognizance, the information dropping in is when that information aligns to what you're seeking, it just drops right in.
the thing when I was told you shouldn't be here, the thing that I was downloading at the time was the plans for an interdimensional ship that people could get in and travel through space-time and travel two different dimensions, two different planets across in an instant. And the thing was is that the whole ship had to be organic. It had to be made out of DNA
Mm.
in order for that to work. There had to be a crew of 5 people, and all 5 people had to be completely in agreement and resonating at a certain frequency of love. And then at the center of the ship, you had to take a single photon of light, and to be able to pull that single photon of light apart, but with the energy of love from your heart. And when you pull that to a certain point, and everybody had agreed on a certain place where they wanted to go, so when they held that image in their head and they had the right vibration in their heart and they had that photon of light and the biological ship, when they opened that up just enough, you'd instantly just like pop through to wherever that place is that you wanted to be.
That's
And
amazing.
then yeah, and like anywhere in the universe. But I was like downloading the plans of like how
Those
to
are
grow this
conscious ships.
ship.
The,
Huh?
these those conscious ships exist. I mean, I don't know if you've
Yeah,
heard the like insiders talk about, I can't remember who it was, not Emery Smith, but oh God, Tompkins, maybe? I can't remember these inside the whistleblowers' names, but they've seen these ships. They
I believe
have,
it.
and
Yeah.
to the point where if you touch it, the ship like reacts to you touching it. Like it changes colors, it
Yeah.
ripples, and yeah, it's all a consciousness interface. There's
Yeah.
no machinery to speak of.
Yeah, and
The
that's exactly, yeah, that's the ship that I was downloading was, it was all based on consciousness and DNA. It was 100% organic. But you could walk into it and
This is fun. This is where we get into the intergalactic storyline because, like what I said before, the waves of volunteers, we're not of Earth. We're here on Earth and we're having a human experience, but many of the volunteers are actually not of Earth origin. And so they're, the star seeds or
mm,
sometimes called wanderers. It really doesn't matter what you call it. It's just that this information, the reason you can even access it or hold a memory of it is because very likely that's technology maybe from a planet that you are very like lived there before. It could be from.
possibly. Yeah. I remember two past, not the full past lives from Earth. Um I did a lot of work. I was first getting into Dolores Cannon, and I did a lot of regression hypnosis through, there was like some YouTube channels I listened to,
Yeah.
but in one of them I was a uh I was a African slave woman, and I remember I was elderly. I was like in my 60s, but it had been like a rough 60 years, and I was working on an olive farm. I was a laborer on an olive farm in southern Spain. And I'm
Interesting.
like, yeah. And which is interesting too, because my ancestry, I've got Portuguese ancestry. So like I have ancestors that were from that region, which I thought was really curious. But I had a very, very clear image, like my hands were bothering me from arthritis, and I was old, and there was like, like the master was there, and I knew that he was a jerk, but he knew to not mess with me too much because I was like the wise woman in the village, and my other past life memory is I was a shopkeeper in in a village on the west coast of the UK, somewhere around like where Manchester is, but it was somewhere in like colonial times, like because I was wearing like the big buckle boots and like the funny hat, and
Right.
but I was like a small merchant, and I owned a little shop, and I had a wife who was just a good wife, and we had two kids, and my son, I had an older son who had died, and I had a younger, my younger of the two kids was very ill, and I was very, very stressed out trying, because I couldn't figure out like how to get help, and like business wasn't going well because the weather was bad and the fish weren't coming in, it was like just like that flash of a memory. I'm like, jeez. And then this one, and my mother tells me stories of this when I had just learned how to walk. uh I would walk around the living room, but I would do like that, like the goose step, like the high step, like walking around with my arm out.
That's going to be awkward.
Yeah. And my mom was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm marching." And she said, "Where'd you learn how to march?" And I said, "In the army." And I would just goose stepping around the living room. Like, then you're like, "Well, no wonder I was racist when I got older, right?"
Yes, but
But then I
in this
remember,
life, balancing it out, right? Like, so
yeah,
got
yeah,
balance.
I don't know. My and then I remember being in like kindergarten and first grade, and we would stand up to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and my arm would shoot out. Like everybody else stands up, puts their hand over their heart, and here's little Sean, like, you know, like, oh, that's not the right thing for some reason. Okay, weird.
I can I tell you my what I got from my past life? Because it was a really weird one. Like if we want to end
Yeah.
on a weird note, I can share that with you. So for those who aren't familiar with the process, in a QHHT session, the quantum healing hypnosis, there's usually a list of questions that you have that you want to ask. And your higher self will select a life for you to view that will help you get answers to your deeper questions. And of course, mine were, and what most people's are, is like, why am I here? Like, what's the purpose? Like, I want to know what I'm supposed to be doing, because it's not super clear. There's a lot of stuff I love to do, and love is always the driver for me. I've got to love it or I'm not doing it. And so when I went into mine, you get dropped down. So you're sort of on this cloud that first they get you like in the mindset, they're looking to see that you're at the right level of trance. And then when you are, you're asked to like drop down, and what do you see? And you look around, and um, you look down at your feet, you look at what you're wearing, and you try to assess, like they'll ask you questions. Who are you? How old are you? I was this boy who was doing his rite of passage for manhood, and they'd left me. I was dropped into these stones, and like I can't get out, and I'm like crawling over the edge looking and seeing all the tribesmen walking away,
Mm.
and I'm left here and I'm scared. And she's like, okay, well, go to where you live. And I'm going into the earth, so it's like into a cave, and I'm going deeper and deeper into the earth, and there's this, she goes, well, where do you sleep? And I see this white, shiny pod, like very futuristic. So I'm wearing a loincloth, but I'm seeing this futuristic pod.
Mm.
And she's like, what are you eating? And I see these very tall white beings, and they're feeding me these, like, looks like balls of light. And as I'm ingesting them, I'm absorbing all this knowledge and information, and it's changing me on the
Mm.
cellular level. I'm going through this big change. And then later in life, she's like, what are you? And I'm the shaman of this group of Mayans. And I'm here to be a spiritual teacher, but I'm also translating those tall white beings. And they looked wild. They were, they looked almost what I would imagine people in Tibet looking like. But they had like, the old kung fu guy with the Fu Manchu and the really
Hmm.
long white beard and
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
bun, but just really big eyes, but looked like that. And I remember the person said, do you know that being now? And I said, yes, it's my husband. And I got mad for a second, because in this life, I'm technically more spiritually advanced than my husband is. But in that life, he was more spiritually advanced than me. And that really was a shot to my ego. It
I
was like,
bet.
stop assuming that you've got something over him. We're equals here. We're all equals here. But
Yeah, exactly. Co-equal
my
partners.
ego was like, damn, like, anyway, so that I'm translating for this group, I am a go-between for this higher energy, and they're teaching this civilization how to advance, and I'm sort of helping have that conversation. And she said, okay, how do you die? And I don't die. I transform into an energy sphere that stays in the sacred site. I become like a force field around it, and when people enter it, I continue to translate for them. I'm not speaking directly to them anymore, but I make it easier for higher energy to be heard and understood by holding that space.
Mm.
And over time, as the tribe I was with developed and many generations went by, they had built these giant statues to these beings. Um, and over time, people forgot what it represented. And so when they go to pray, they pray to the statue and not
Oh,
trying to communicate with the higher energy. And it was like this civilization went from being this like incredibly connected one to one where they forgot what they were connected to. And that was when I
yeah.
had to leave. And it was just like I disapparated, but I was very sad when I left that I couldn't keep it going.
Yeah. That reminds me of but in the Ten Commandments, that's not really called the Ten Commandments, but one of the Ten Commandments is to have no graven image before you. And in the Islamic tradition too, like they're very, very strict about you don't like that's why you can't draw the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They're very, very strict about like that. You do not do that. And it's not because they're but it's
It's
because of that concept. Because
right,
you
because
can't, yeah, they don't want you to put focus on the thing. Like don't put focus on like the physical body or the sculpture or whatever the thing is. You have to put your focus on Allah or on God or like the higher idea, which in a way, I suppose, I might get in trouble for saying this, but goes back to that higher archetype really that we talked about before,
Well,
right?
there's
That's the thing that we're supposed to be keeping an eye on, not an image of it, right?
when you create an image of it, there's again this really weird wedge of separation. It's not you and this thing coming. One of the things that I really had to get out of my own thinking, and again, not having a Christian or any religious background, but I always put God outside of me. I was always talking to God outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when I gained my personal power is when I started recognizing God's within, right? Like God, that's where I'm connecting with God. God is in all
Mm-hmm.
of us. It's in everything that's alive. It's everything that has sentience. There's God, right? And so it was stop separating from it. And
Mm-hmm.
we're taught, especially on the religious level, you're taught to separate from it. It's you over here and God over there. When
Yeah.
really it's that inner connection that you've got to remember. So yes, having like an image, no matter, and I understand like the intention's always good. It's never a like, I'm going to make this so I separate people from, their divine power. It's more in reverence to the divine.
Mm. Yeah.
But other than the person who made it in reverence to the divine, the next person who comes along goes, that's the divine, and is
Right.
stepped slightly away from where source is, where God is, where how we're really connected. And that was, yeah, that was that moment at the end of that life where it was like I can't reconnect them. I can't reach them
Mm.
now.
It's that same idea of, I think I mentioned earlier with like the in Buddhism they say that you can be pointing at the moon trying to get your dog to see the moon, but he's just looking at your hand.
Right.
I think that one of the this brings up there's a passage in the book of Matthew where the Pharisees were trying to catch Jesus because they were always trying to kill him. They're like, we want this dude dead. He's causing problems. But they asked him,
On the run then, right? Like
yeah. But they said, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your spirit. And the second is like the first, to love your neighbor as yourself. And growing up and in the church even today, people focus on the first two parts of that, where they say you have to love the Lord your God and then love your neighbor as yourself. But what changed my view on Christianity was that phrase in the middle that usually they're just like, and and love your neighbor by yourself. But what Jesus said is the second is like the first.
mm. Well,
So
that's the golden
how
rule.
is loving your neighbor as yourself like loving the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and spirit, unless your neighbor is God,
So
and by extension, so are you.
exactly.
You can't not be God. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, how can you like somehow it takes like an immense ego trip to say, well, God is like everything else, but from
Let
this
me
layer of skin inward, I'm different.
Right. So that is the trick, if you will. That is the little infiltration that happens into all things, right? Because the
Yeah.
negative path, their goal is separation. And the irony is we're only given ego at the third density level, which is what we're all experiencing now. So when a being
Mm-hmm.
goes through their human life, they go through third density and they're experiencing the ego, which gives us the feeling of being separate. I'm over here and you're over there. So how could we be the same?
Right.
It really messes with us. And our ego, it's a gift though. And the gift is simply to do this. If I don't know really, because I can't remember what I was before or what I knew before, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
wiped clear of all memory. And I start in this life. And if I don't know that I'm connected to everything, I have to choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't know what I was before or what I taught before. So, this sense of individuality helps me feel like I'm making an authentic choice.
Mhm.
That's the gift of the ego, is I get to feel individual in my choice. No one's making this for me. I believe I'm making this choice for myself. Now, the reason third density is so intense and kind of important is this choice you end up making here will determine your next path. So the path splits after third density. Everybody comes up 1 through 3 in the same uh, vein, if you will. But after
Mhm.
third density, there's the split, there's the negative path and the positive path. And so the reason why we reincarnate so much at third density is we have to polarize to some degree. You've got to make a choice so you can choose the next path. And it's something where I feel like God is like, please take your time. Like if you need to do this 70,000 times to figure it out, do that, because you're kind of committed to this choice after that.
Like in the good place again,
Exactly.
you
That
know?
TV show is, I really enjoy it because it does give you like a little bit of like philosophy lessons.
Yeah.
I know that I don't think they have everything right, but I feel
No.
like
But it did like their final solution in that, which spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, where their idea was that like a heaven of eternal bliss with all of your wishes coming true instantly is torture.
oh
And it
yeah.
wasn't until they said, okay, well, you can stay here, you made it to the good place, and you can leave whenever you want. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, and then started to, then you could live your life if you knew that there was an ending to it, until you waited to and by the way, those last 2 episodes, I'm just like just tears.
I
It's just like
know.
tears
I
coming
know.
down. I'm like, oh
So hard when she
God.
leaves. You're just
I
like,
know. I'm like, no, dude. But then and then she's got the calendar with him and his
yeah.
mailman suit and everything. Like, oh God. Anyway.
Yeah. It's a great show. I love it.
Oh yeah. I just did it like a week and a half ago. I binge watched it again.
I
And
know I'm doing that right now, actually.
so good.
That and The Office are the two shows that it's like The Office is like a comfort show for me. It's like when I need to
Okay.
watch something where I get to just like relax and enjoy it. I love to watch The Office.
For
But
me, it's Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the animated series.
okay, I haven't seen that.
Because there's like 100, I don't even know how many episodes. They're all, and I'm an obnoxious Star Wars guy anyway. But there's an interesting theory, you probably enjoy this, where it's The Office, Parks and Recreation, and The Good Place were all
Yes.
put together by the same guy. And they're
Yes.
all kind of continuations of the same story. I
Yes,
like to look more into
I
that.
saw that and I was like, wow, whoever figured that out? Like that takes a lot of like skill and dedication to bring that together, but I thought it was interesting. Yeah. Or the
And a
one,
lot of binge watching.
and what about seeing it as like the whole thing is actually Michael is in hell? Um,
Yes.
that's where you're like, huh? Like it's not actually those characters who are going through it, it's
Yeah.
him going through it. Who's the
Yeah.
architect, for those who are like, what are you talking about? The architect of the good place is actually the one in hell and like transcending it, not these characters that he thinks he's manipulating. So
So fascinating.
it really is.
What a great show. Hey, we got five. Oh, look, it's an angel number, 555.
Oh, wow. I love that. That's perfect.
It's a good number to end on. All right. So give me some plugs. What do you want people to do? What do you want people to check out? I'm gonna put links in the description, all that kind of awesome stuff as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so if
So do
you're
you have a closing? Let's do the closing thought thing. Do you ever watch Craig Ferguson?
Craig Ferguson, sometimes, yes, I've seen
Well,
him.
he always that thing. He was like at the end of his show, he was like, "Do you want to do the awkward pause or the mouth organ?" I don't have a mouth organ here,
I don't have one
and I
either.
don't want to do the awkward pause. So,
Wow.
do you have a closing thought on all of this? Actually, you know what? Can you like step back and like hear a closing thought for us?
Yeah, I can hear a closing thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That what is this? I'm listening.
Oh, from the team. Got it. Okay. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. No, from the team.
you
Yeah.
were gonna, I was like ready for you. I'm
No,
like, yeah.
not me. No. Enlighten me.
All right, team and spirit. Guides, angels, ascended masters, higher self, source energy. Come on through. What's the final thought you have here? All right, so they were like, this has been there, they've really enjoyed it. They said it's like brain candy, and like this is the places that people love to go. Um, what they're hoping this conversation has done for you was sort of give you many facets at once by bringing the two of us together. We've sort of like taken them on a journey of not only what this life is about, but sort of the construction of the universe, if you will. And they're just asking us to enjoy considering all the facets and understanding that each of these facets makes up the greater picture. So we were looking at many different facets of a much bigger crystal, if you will. I like to look at it like a crystal. Um, all of them represent an important facet that we're meant to experience, and not all of it gets experienced in one life. And so when you get together with another like-minded, like-hearted person, you get to see more of that picture together. And so really just enjoying this whole thing, and again, seeing that there is a lot of synchronicity between us. We actually share a lot of different things and come to different conclusions on some things at the same time, which makes it quite fascinating, right? Like there's this
Yeah.
idea of the ultimate truth is trying to see all the facets that you can. So while we're looking for that, try to see as many facets. Rather than deciding it's one facet, try to see as many as you can, and you'll get closer to that ultimate truth.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a great way to wrap it up. Therese, this was so much fun. Okay. So my dogs just came down, which means they're about to start barking and they probably have to pee.
Let's let the dogs go. It's been so great to talk to you.
Sorry.
And yeah, let's definitely stay in touch. Oh, look at that face.
Hey, okay.
Look at that face. Look at that little butterball.
Hi.
Oh my gosh.
Say hello. This is Gigi.
Gigi looks so cool.
Gigi, well, here, let's close it on this. Gigi is a min pin, Chihuahua Shih Tzu. So we call her a mini chew shit.
Mini chew.
And she does. She's like, the cat box is always clean for some reason.
Oh no. It's the kitty roca. That's what we call that. Kitty roca.
Okay. Yeah, she needs to go out. All right.
All right.
Say goodbye.
I can see the pain.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh, there you go. She's like, please, Dad. All right. I'll talk to you later, Therese.
All right. Bye, Sean.
Bye.
I love it. I love it.